Chapter 2992. Following the orders of Shao Chun and the others, at the center of the land of all living beings, where the temple was located. In just a few hours, many figures flew out in all directions. These people were all masters of the temple, and each of them was at least in the emperor realm. They used to follow Shao Chun, Lin Yun, Dongfang Yun, and the other divine ancestors. After the land of all living beings was established, they chose to join the temple. Although the temple usually didn't care about the land of all living beings, it didn't mean that the temple was weak. On the contrary, the temple produced many masters. Although there were many masters in the land of all living beings now, the land of all living beings had many masters. Moreover, because of the previous great opportunity, many masters had emerged from the various great forces in the land of all living beings. In particular, the number of Emperor Realm and Ancestor Realm masters had experienced an explosive growth. But even so, more than half of the Emperor Realm and Ancestor Realm masters and World Masters in the land of all living beings still belonged to the temple. These were the masters of the temple, and the reason why the temple could firmly control the land of all living beings. Such overwhelming power was something that no force in the land of all living beings could compare to. This time, after the land of all living beings was established, the temple truly showed its power to everyone. Numerous masters from the temple came out in full force. Countless Emperor Realm and Ancestor Realm masters rushed to various parts of the land of all living beings. They only had one goal, and that was to thoroughly investigate all the forces in the land of all living beings and not let anyone escape. As long as they were found to be in cahoots with the origin world, they would be directly destroyed. In addition to the masters of the temple, people like Long Qing, Lin Yuan, the monk, the Taoist priest, and the others who were in charge of this search were also dispatched. Each person was in charge of one mansion. This was the arrangement of Shao Chun and the others. This way, the efficiency would be higher, and they would be able to guard against any fish that slipped through the net. The monk and the Taoist priest lazily walked out of the temple and said helplessly as they looked at the masters flying across the sky, "Sai, it's really troublesome. It's a little troublesome, but don't complain. Can't you see that the divine ancestor and the others don't look good?" With the temperament of the monk and the Taoist priest, it was obvious that they were unwilling to deal with such troublesome matters. It was too much work, and it was extremely cumbersome, but there was no other way. When they thought of Shao Chun, Lin Yun, and the others' ugly expressions, the monk and the Taoist priest knew that there was no room for negotiation in this matter. Hearing the monk's words, the Taoist nodded his head helplessly. This was the only way. However, investigating all the forces in the land of all living beings wasn't something that could be done easily. It would probably take a lot of time and effort this time. Let's go. Hurry up. After greeting the Taoist priest, the monk walked away. The two of them were in charge of different prefectures, so it was naturally impossible for them to be together. At the same time, Li Tian and Xianyuan Ling, who were in Qinshan City, also received orders. The two of them had to rush to the three prefectures where new cultivators had appeared. Since new cultivators had appeared in these three prefectures, they had to immediately rush over. This meant that someone must have contacted the origin world. Therefore, the three prefectures were the most important places. They were given to Li Tian and Xianyuan Ling. In the Wang family's residence in Qinshan City, Li Tian and Xianyuan Ling, who had rushed over, sat opposite each other. They were surprised by Shao Chen's decision. The two of them weren't surprised. After all, such a thing had happened. It was normal for Shao Chun and the others to make such a decision. Let's split up. It'll be more efficient. Yes, that's the only way. Li Tian didn't refuse Xianyuan Ling's suggestion to split up. As for Xiao Yao, Xiao Lao, and the others, Xiao Yao, Dongfang Lin, Xiao Wan, and Lin Feng followed Li Tian. The others followed Xianyuan Ling. After settling the matter, the two of them set off and left Qinshan City. In one night, Qinshan City was basically turned upside down. It was certain that there were no problems with the other major families except the Wang family. No one had contacted the origin world, so there was no need to worry about Qinshan City. Such a big move by the sacred temple naturally made all the major forces in the land of all living beings anxious. Everyone was afraid of being implicated. However, the current situation wasn't something that could be solved by fear. Moreover, in the face of the arrival of the sacred temple's experts, no force dared to obstruct them. In this special period, anyone who dared to obstruct the sacred temple's actions would be eliminated directly. Search the sacred temple. Sir, yes. From today onwards, the sect will be sealed. No one is allowed to enter or leave. Open all the forbidden areas and secret areas. Such a scene could be seen everywhere in the land of all living beings. After the sacred temple's experts arrived, the first thing they did was to seal the entire sect. Then, they asked the sect to open all the forbidden areas and secret areas. No matter where they were, even the ancestral shrine, they had to be opened unconditionally. This was because no one knew where those teleportation arrays would be carved. None of them could be missed. This time, the sacred temple wasn't joking. Therefore, in the face of such a request, the sect leaders of the major forces didn't dare to hesitate at all. They immediately complied. Countless forces had the sacred temple's experts stationed there and carried out an absolutely meticulous search. The Spirit Origin Valley was considered a relatively powerful force in the land of all living beings. There were 2 world lords in the sect. They also had 7 or 8 ancestor realm experts, making them the strongest force in the land of all living beings, second only to the sacred temple. But even so, when the sacred temple's experts arrived, the Spirit Origin Valley had no choice but to follow orders. Long Qing was in charge of the Spirit Origin Valley, and he personally commanded the sect to open all the forbidden areas and secret areas. The disciples of the Spirit Origin Valley were also interrogated. The sect leader looked around at the chaos in the Spirit Origin Valley, a grave expression on his face. Off to the side, an elder of the Spirit Origin Valley said with a complicated expression, "What do we do now, sect leader? What can we do? Do you really dare to defy the sacred temple? Besides, this is the decision of the exalted sacred ancestor. Anyone who resists will be destroyed." "But, no buts," the sect leader said. "Do as the sacred temple says. Cooperate fully and don't resist." In the face of the sacred temple, even someone as powerful as the Spirit Origin Valley couldn't possibly fight back. As soon as he finished speaking, the sect master of the Spirit Origin Valley sighed helplessly as he looked at the commotion outside the valley. "A storm is coming," he said. "I wonder how many people will suffer this time." It wasn't hard to imagine how the land of all living beings would be flooded with rivers of blood. Many organizations would be wiped out and would disappear from the face of the earth. Please add me to your collection. Please recommend me. Chapter 2993. Name, Age, and Origin. In the Spirit Origin Valley, every disciple had to go through an investigation by the sacred temple. Not only did they have to confirm their identity, but they also had to confirm their origin. This was a very complicated job, but none of the disciples of the Spirit Origin Valley dared to resist. The reason was simple. The sacred temple was not joking this time. Moreover, Xiao Chun and the others had already made it clear. Any person or force that did not cooperate with the investigation would be dealt with as if they had colluded with the origin world. Everyone knew that this matter had crossed the bottom line of the divine temple, so no one dared to play any tricks on this matter. Even the sect master of the Spirit Origin Valley had to be respectful when facing the powerhouses of the divine temple. In the main hall of the Spirit Origin Valley, Long Qing sat on the main seat. Below him, the sect master and the other higher-ups of the Spirit Origin Valley sat upright. Long Qing swept his gaze across the crowd. He did not beat around the bush and spoke directly. "I won't talk about this matter. Everyone should know that this matter is not trivial. Moreover, it was the divine ancestor who personally gave the order. I hope that the Spirit Origin Valley will not do anything stupid. In addition, after the investigation of the Spirit Origin Valley is over, I need you to accompany me in investigating the other forces." The land of all living beings was so large, and there were so many forces. It was naturally difficult for the sacred temple to thoroughly investigate all of them. Therefore, they could only rely on the forces of the Spirit Origin Valley. They had a large number of people and high prestige in a certain area. With their help, it would naturally be easier. Of course, there was a prerequisite. They had to ensure that they had not colluded with the origin world and that they were innocent. Otherwise, if there was something wrong with these forces and they were asked to help investigate, it would be a case of a thief crying out to catch a thief. It would be a disaster. This was why Long Qing, the monk, and the Taoist masters had attacked these forces as soon as they had arrived. Only by proving their innocence would the Holy Temple be at ease to use them and let them help the Holy Temple investigate other forces. For now, the Spirit Origin Valley should not have any problems. Moreover, the Spirit Origin Valley had been very cooperative from top to bottom, whether it was the forbidden areas or secret cultivation areas. Even the Spirit Origin Valley was open to the experts of the temple without hesitation. Moreover, none of the disciples of Lingyuan Valley had been found to be suspicious. Therefore, Long Qing trusted Lingyuan Valley for the time being. With such a premise, it was normal for the Spirit Essence Valley to help the Sacred Hall. When the conditions were right, success would come naturally. Hearing Long Qing's words, the Spirit Essence Valley sect leader and the other higher-ups naturally wouldn't refuse. On the contrary, they were quite happy to agree. We will do our best to fulfill the Holy Lord's request. To be able to help the temple, it would only be beneficial to the Spirit Essence Valley. Not to mention that he would gain the favor of the temple. The temple would definitely reward him after the matter was over. This was the way Xiao Chun and the others did things. They were never stingy when it was time to reward. For example, the Spirit Origin Valley, who had helped out, would definitely be rewarded when the time came. Even for the Spirit Origin Valley, these rewards were extremely precious. After all, it was the Divine Temple, and any random item they took out was enough to be called a peerless treasure. Their attitude was very proper. Seeing this, Long Qing nodded in satisfaction. The tactfulness of the Spirit Origin Valley had saved him a lot of trouble. For example, Long Qing, the monk, and the Taoist priest were more relaxed, at least for the time being. On the other hand, Xianyuan Ling and Li Tian were completely different. They were going to the area where the new warrior had been found. Therefore, things were more troublesome, and time was even more tight. After parting ways with Li Tian, Xianyuan Ling brought Xiao Lao and the others to a city where the new warrior had been found. This city wasn't big. Just like the incident with the Wang family, the new warrior had been found in this city without any warning. But until now, the identity of the new warrior was still a mystery. They went directly to the city lord's mansion. This was a Xiao Chun, and there weren't any big family clans in it. Therefore, everything in the city was handled by the city lord's mansion. Since Xianyuan Ling and the others had just arrived, they naturally had to investigate the city lord's mansion first. In the main hall, Xianyuan Ling sat on the main seat, with Xiao Lao and the others on his left and right. Just like before, the city lord's mansion and the entire city were completely sealed off. The people from the Divine Temple took over. At this moment, the city lord stood in front of Xianyuan Ling and said nervously, "Lord Envoy, we don't know the identity of the new warrior." Naturally, the city lord knew the purpose of Xianyuan Ling and the others' visit, so he was extremely nervous, afraid that he would be implicated. But is this just a matter of being implicated? Speaking of which, the new warrior's identity was none other than the deceased wife of the city lord in front of him. Just like the Wang family head, the city lord had fallen ill from longing. Then, under the instigation of the origin world, he made a deal with the ancestors. The primogenitors also kept their promise and revived his dead wife. Speaking of which, ever since his deceased wife was resurrected, he had been very careful, afraid that this matter would be exposed. He knew very well what the consequences would be if this matter was exposed, but who would have thought? Just 2 nights ago, for some reason, his wife suddenly rushed out of the city lord's mansion like crazy. After arriving in the city, she kept causing destruction and finally exposed her identity. The city lord reacted immediately and took his wife back to the city lord's mansion to hide. He also secretly killed those who had seen his wife. However, the matter still spread and was immediately known by the divine temple. The city lord could be said to be extremely flustered, but he still forced himself to calm down in front of Xian Yuanling. Unfortunately, his acting skills and mental strength were obviously much weaker than the Wang family head. In front of Xian Yuanling, he was full of flaws. Looking at the pale city lord, Xian Yuanling did not say anything. He already had a preliminary judgment in his heart, and the city lord's mansion was the most important. Xian Yuanling said unhurriedly as he looked faintly at the city lord below. I wonder if you've heard of this saying? What saying? It's called if you knew it would come to this. Why did you do it in the first place? Now that this matter has been exposed, do you know what will happen to your family and the entire city lord's mansion? The moment Xian Yuanling said that, the city lord was stunned on the spot, and cold sweat broke out on his forehead. Xian Yuanling's words made it clear that the city lord's mansion had become the main suspect. He did not expect himself to be exposed so quickly. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 2994. Hearing Xian Yuanling's words, the city lord was instantly stunned. His face turned pale, and his back was instantly soaked in sweat. He had always thought that he had performed well, but he never thought that Xian Yuanling would suspect him like that. He did not know what he had done wrong to make Xian Yuanling suspect him. He did not seem to have given himself away. Could it be that the great messenger was testing him? That's right, he was definitely testing him. After the initial nervousness of the attack, the city lord quickly realized that Xian Yuanling was testing him. Because from the looks of it, Xian Yuanling did not have any evidence. Moreover, those who had been in contact with his wife were all killed by him in advance. It was impossible for them to leave any clues behind. If that was the case, how could Xian Yuanling suspect him so quickly? He could not help but praise himself. Fortunately, he did not give himself away just now. Pretending to be calm, the city lord looked at Xian Yuanling and said innocently, "Great messenger, I don't understand what you mean." The city lord played dumb. "I don't understand what you mean, and I don't know what you're talking about. This matter has nothing to do with me." Looking at the city lord, who was still stubbornly resisting, Xian Yuanling smiled and was not angry at all. He had already guessed that this would be the outcome. People like him would not shed tears until they saw the coffin. "You think that I don't have any evidence now?" His gaze was calm, and his tone was calm. Hearing that, the city lord did not regret it. "Great messenger, I really have nothing to do with this matter." He still refused to admit it. Seeing that, Xian Yuanling could not be bothered to say anything else. He gave Xiao Lao a look, and soon, the city lord's wife was brought in by an expert from the divine temple. Seeing his wife appear, the city lord was instantly dumbfounded. He stood rooted to the ground and could not believe that his wife would appear there. After the incident, he sent his wife away immediately. Moreover, in order to reveal a flaw, he did it very secretly. Even the entire city lord's mansion did not know about it. He had personally sent his wife away and hid her in a place that he thought no one would be able to find. He thought that it was flawless, but who would have thought that his wife would be found by the divine temple after a short period of time? How did the holy temple find his wife? The city lord couldn't understand. But now was obviously not the time for him to dwell on this. His wife had been found, and the situation seemed to be completely different from what he had imagined. Actually, the city lord did not know that before he arrived here, Xian Yuanling had already ordered people to secretly investigate the city lord mansion. They found out that a woman had suddenly disappeared from the city lord's mansion. Even the people in the city lord's mansion did not know the identity of this woman. Moreover, she seemed to have appeared out of thin air. Normally, the city lord would not allow anyone to come into contact with this woman. Upon hearing this news, Xian Yuanling immediately guessed that this woman might be the city lord's deceased wife. It was not difficult for the temple to investigate the past of the city lord. He knew that his wife had already passed away a few years ago. Now that she had reappeared, there was only one explanation. The city master had colluded with the origin world. The origin world had helped him revive his wife. This was also why Xian Yuanling was certain that this matter was related to the city lord's mansion from the very beginning. He had already ordered people to capture the city lord's wife, even though the city lord thought that he had done it flawlessly. No one could find the whereabouts of his wife, but he still underestimated the power of the temple. In the land of all living beings, it was not an exaggeration to say that if the temple was determined to find someone, it would be impossible for them not to find her unless she disappeared from the face of the earth. Moreover, in such a short period of time, it was impossible for the city lord to bring his wife to a faraway place. Therefore, it was even easier to find her. It did not take long for the temple to find this person and bring her back directly. Compared to the city lord's panic, his wife was obviously very calm. This was normal. After all, a new warrior did not have emotions and would not be afraid at all. Even though she was now captured by the temple, she did not panic at all. Xin Yuanling said unhurriedly as he glanced at the city lord's wife and then looked at the city lord. Now, do you have anything else to say? The city lord did not know what to say when his wife had fallen into the hands of the temple. He remained silent and looked at his wife with a complicated gaze. The reason he did all this was because of his wife. He missed his dead wife too much. When he found out that the origin world could resurrect his dead wife, the city lord agreed to cooperate with the origin world in a fit of obsession. Although he knew that his dead wife was no longer the same person after she was resurrected. So what? He only wanted to be by his wife's side. Even if she did not have emotions and did not know what feelings were, as long as he could see her every day, he would be satisfied. He unconsciously wanted to walk to his wife's side. Seeing this, the expert from the temple was about to stop him when Xin Yuanling spoke. Let him be. With Xin Yuanling's order, the expert from the temple respectfully retreated to the side, and the city lord successfully came to his wife's side. He gently held his wife's hand, although his wife still had a dull expression, as if she did not feel anything at all. The city lord's face revealed a warm smile as he held his wife's hand again. He gently held his wife's hand as if he was holding a treasure and would not let go no matter what. At this moment, there was only a gentle smile on the city lord's face. He looked at his wife and spoke slowly. Actually, I know the methods of the origin world. When a new cultivator is resurrected, they will not be the same person at all. They will only have the same appearance. Even so, I am willing. I do not have many thoughts. I just want to be able to see her every day when I wake up. I want to be by her side and look at her like this. Although she may not have any feelings and does not know what love is, she will not understand my love. Even so, I do not care. As long as I can be by her side, it will be fine. Then, the city lord turned his head and looked at Xin Yuanling with a hint of pleading in his eyes. My lord, I do not have any other wishes. I know that I cannot escape death. I only hope that I can be buried with her after I die. That is enough. I hope that my lord can grant my wish. Please collect, vote, recommend. Chapter 2995. At this point, the city lord also knew that he had no chance of surviving. Therefore, he did not beg for mercy. Moreover, he knew the consequences of doing so from the very beginning. Perhaps he was like the Wang family head. The reason why they had agreed to go to the origin world was not because of the primogenitor's ability to bewitch people. It was entirely because of the desire in their hearts that caused mischief. Their longing for their loved ones had made them make such a decision without hesitation. Did they not know the changes that occurred after a new cultivator was resurrected? Did they not know that new cultivators did not have emotions and desires? Did they not know that their loved ones were no longer the same people after they were resurrected? Obviously, they knew all of this. After all, they had fought with the origin world for so long. How could they not know what new cultivators were like? Even so, they still made their choice in the end. Even if they were no longer the same people in their memories, even if they did not have emotions and desires, so what? They knew all this. However, just as the city lord had said, he did not care about this. Or rather, he could accept this. In their hearts, the only thing they wanted was to see their loved ones by their side every day when they woke up. It did not matter even if she was just a bag of skin. It did not matter even if she did not know them at all. As long as they could see her every day, it was enough. Just like the current city lord and his wife. facing her husband's words. The wife's expression was wooden, as if what her husband said had nothing to do with her. She was not moved by her husband's words at all. Perhaps to her, this person who had held her hand and wanted to protect her until the last moment was just a stranger. Even though she clearly knew that this person was her husband, her most intimate lover, she had long forgotten how to love him. Xin Yuanling's expression did not change much when he heard the city lord's words. He only sighed secretly in his heart. Perhaps this was the terrifying part of the origin world. It was a method that could resurrect new cultivators. To all living beings, it was undoubtedly like looking at a Pandora's box. It drew out the most primitive and pure desires in many people's hearts. Once such thoughts appeared, it was very difficult to get rid of them. They clearly knew that it was wrong, but they still walked on this path of no return without hesitation. Perhaps this was human nature. It was very contradictory, but also very real. All right, faced with the city lord's final request, Xin Yuanling did not reject it and directly nodded in agreement. Seeing this, the city lord couldn't help but reveal a faint smile. This was his final wish, and he was already very satisfied to be able to achieve it. Many thanks, my lord. My apologies for the trouble I've caused you, sacred ancestor. As he spoke, the city lord turned to look at his wife. Seeing that his wife was still in a daze, the city lord smiled gently. Being able to be buried with you is already the best outcome. Without much hesitation, the city lord pointed out a finger, and the finger light instantly pierced through his wife's heart. Death didn't make his wife feel any fear. Her expression didn't change at all. After killing his wife, the city lord also directly cut off his own heart veins. Under the witness of Xin Yuanling and the others, the city lord and his wife both died. Xin Yuanling waved his hand as he looked at the two people who were still hugging each other, even in death. Take them away and give them a proper burial. Also, kill all those who are related to this matter. Xin Yuanling didn't know what he was feeling, but he didn't show any mercy. Although the city lord's feelings were understandable, he couldn't forgive him. If everyone was like the city lord and did such a thing for their own selfish desires, then the entire land of all living beings would probably collapse on its own. Thinking of the result, the land of all living beings would probably be flooded with new cultivators. When that time came, what would the land of all living beings amount to? Hearing Xin Yuanling's words, the sacred temple experts below respectfully acknowledged, and then took the bodies of the city lord and his wife away. The matter here was considered resolved, but no one knew how many similar things would happen in the entire land of all living beings. By now, Xin Yuanling had already thought it through. In fact, the problem didn't lie with the primogenitors, but with these people themselves. Faced with the temptation of being able to see their loved ones again, these people couldn't resist, so they made such a choice. Every one of them knew the consequences, but every one of them did not hesitate. It was truly laughable. Uncle, do you think what he said just now is true? At this time, Xiao Lao also looked at Xin Yuanling and asked him. Obviously, what the city lord said just now had touched Xiao Lao's heart. Moreover, Xiao Lao felt that it was very strange. He clearly knew the consequences of doing so, but why did he still make such a choice? Wasn't this clearly knowing that he would die, but still taking the initiative to die? Was there really such a foolish person in this world? Xiao Lao didn't have much understanding of these things. Seeing this, Xin Yuanling asked with a smile, if one day your mother and the others died, would you make such a choice? Would you resurrect her as a new cultivator? Instead of answering, he directly threw the question to Xin Yuanling. After saying this, without waiting for Xiao Lao to reply, Xin Yuanling got up and left. He still had to find the teleportation array. Just now, the city lord had already told Xin Yuanling the location of the teleportation array. Now, he had to destroy the array. This was the most important problem. Watching Xin Yuanling leave, Xiao Lao kept thinking about the question just now. If his mother had died, would he have made the same choice as the city lord? Xiao Lao didn't know, but he was sure that if his mother really died, he would be very sad. If there was a chance, how could he not want his mother to come back from the dead and continue to be by his side? Although he didn't know how to put it, Xiao Lao seemed to understand the city lord's way of doing things. Was he stupid? It was indeed very stupid, but there was no other way. In order to be able to see his loved ones, this was nothing. In fact, what Xin Yuanling really wanted to tell Xiao Lao was that this matter seemed to be a conspiracy of the ancestors. In the big picture, the real problem was with the living beings. They wanted to see their loved ones, so they took this path. Even if the ancestors didn't tempt them, once they had such thoughts, they would very likely be unable to resist contacting the ancestors. Desire was like an inner demon. Once it appeared, it was very difficult to control. Therefore, in order to solve this problem, the most important thing was not with the ancestors, but with the living beings of the world. If this problem couldn't be solved, then there was no way to prevent this kind of thing from happening. After all, there were always so many fools in this world, whether it was you or me, begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 2996. After leaving the main hall, Xin Yuanling went to the backyard of the city lord's residence and found the teleportation array there. Just like the Wang family's teleportation array, it was a small teleportation array. After checking, it was confirmed that this teleportation array had not been used before. Without hesitation, he destroyed it. The teleportation array was destroyed, and the city lord's residence would probably be cleaned up. Many people would lose their heads because of this. Sighing, Xin Yuanling said bitterly, "Will you really not regret it?" Recalling the city lord's last words, Xin Yuanling had mixed feelings. He said that he would not regret it. But was it true? Everything went smoothly here. After settling the matter at the city lord's residence, Xin Yuanling led Xiao Yao and the rest to their next destination. This time, Xiao Chun and the rest were ordered to investigate the entire land of all living beings. Therefore, the workload was not small. Meanwhile, Li Tian, who was in another place, also found evidence of a new warrior. In a large family clan, as the head of the family, he used the same method to revive his wife. As for the reason, it was the same as the city lords. Like Xin Yuanling, Li Tian did not spend much effort to capture the wife of the head of the family. When he saw his wife, the head of the family was also stunned, but he quickly gave up. He had been caught red-handed. What would he say now? However, compared to the city lord, the head of the family was obviously more resentful. He first looked at his wife gently, then turned his head and looked at Li Tian unwillingly. As long as I live with my wife, even if she is a new warrior, what threat does she pose to the land of all living beings? Why can't we tolerate her existence? Is the divine temple really so heartless? He felt that he did not do anything wrong. Furthermore, ever since his wife was revived, he had been taking care of her carefully and did not cause her any trouble. But why was the divine temple so ruthless? Was it because his wife was a new warrior? So what if she was a new warrior? How could a mere new warrior pose any threat to the divine temple? Li Tian was furious. Facing the question of the head of the family, he replied expressionlessly, "It's not wrong for you to miss your late wife. So the divine temple is so overbearing? I'm not done yet. It's not wrong to miss someone, but it's wrong to make a decision because of that. You think you can take good care of your deceased wife. Let's not talk about whether you can do it, but have you ever thought about what the entire land of all life would be like if everyone was like you? The world is in chaos. I think you're not the only one who lost your family. If everyone is like this, then wouldn't the land of all living beings be filled with new martial artists? And these new warriors will only listen to the primogenitor's orders. You know this, right? How are you going to control them? Did he kill his wife with his own hands? Because of your own selfish desires, you disregarded the entire land of all living beings. Have you ever thought about others like this?" His tone was very calm, without any anger, as if he was talking about something very normal. Hearing Li Tian's words, the clan leader fell silent. How could he not know this? Moreover, Li Tian's words were very accurate. He was indeed trying to satisfy his own selfish desires. After fighting against the origin world for so many years, which family in the land of living beings hadn't lost a family member? That was the truth, but very few people had done what he had done. He stood there with a complicated expression, not knowing what to say. At this moment, Li Tian continued. Birth, old age, sickness, and death, the cycle of reincarnation. This is the rule of the world. Anyone who breaks this rule will be punished. Turn around and look. You've always been immersed in the past. Have you ever thought that when people die, new lives will be born? This is the meaning of life. While speaking, Li Tian's gaze fell on the family members in the courtyard. At the same time, the clan leader did the same. His eyes reddened instantly. That's right. He had always missed his deceased wife, but he had never paid attention to the birth of new lives in the family. Looking at the crying babies in the hands of many of the family members, they represented new lives. In just a short year, so many new lives had been born. Unfortunately, he had never paid attention to them before. Only now, after Li Tian's reminder, did he really pay attention to his descendants. For a moment, he didn't know what to say. He turned his head and said softly, Sir, can you spare my life? Sir, can you spare these little fellows? They don't know anything. Do you understand now? Hearing this, Li Tian didn't answer. It was a very sad thing to be immersed in the sorrow of the past, but to be unwilling to look forward to the future. It was a pity that he understood this at the last moment, but it was all too late. Was it worth it to bury an entire family for a person who could never return? Without saying anything, Li Tian waved his hand. The surrounding cultivators of the divine temple naturally acted. Without a doubt, this family was uprooted. All of the clansmen had been killed, but the babies had been spared. No matter how cruel Li Tian was, he couldn't bear to kill these babies who were crying piteously for food. And they would be arranged to live in a new family. Perhaps even in death, these babies wouldn't know their identity and wouldn't know that they were once part of this family. But to them, this was already the best outcome. Seeing the entire family being killed, Xiao Yao and the others still couldn't bear to see it, but they didn't say anything. Just like Li Tian had said, this matter might seem tragic, but it had to be contained. Otherwise, if everyone was like this, what would become of the land of all living beings in the future? Would new cultivators be everywhere? Would the land of all living beings occasionally turn into a pot of porridge after the primogenitors gave the order? No matter how tragic and pitiful the reason was, they couldn't make such a choice. The dead were already dead, but at the same time, new lives were constantly being born in this world. This was reincarnation. It wasn't a good thing to only look at the past and be immersed in the past without seeing the future. The entire family was completely annihilated, and such a scene was playing out everywhere in the land of all living beings. The number of new cultivators was much more than Xiao Chun and the others had imagined. Many people had reached an agreement with the origin world because of their own selfish desires, so that their deceased relatives could be resurrected in a different state. Everyone might have their own reasons, but it couldn't be an excuse for them to make such a choice. Please collect, vote, recommend. Chapter 2997. Everyone had their own reasons for becoming a new martial artist. Furthermore, their stories could also be tragic. They had chosen this method because they loved the dead, but this couldn't be used as an excuse. If everyone only thought about themselves, then the entire land of all life would probably be in complete chaos. At that time, the land of all life would probably fall apart before the origin world could do anything. Nothing could be accomplished without rules. No matter what reason one had, there were some things that couldn't be done. Half a year passed in the blink of an eye. During this time, the land of all life could be said to be in complete chaos. New cultivators appeared one after another in various places, and there were already a few hundred of them. Moreover, new cultivators appeared in every place. There was even a teleportation formation in the sacred palace. In other words, the origin world had at least a few hundred teleportation formations in the land of all life. Just thinking about it made one feel afraid. Just think about it. If Xiao Chun and the others hadn't paid attention to the first new cultivator, then what would the consequences have been? If Xiao Chun and the others had been careless, they would have chosen to attack the origin world directly. Then, these teleportation formations would very likely have become the sharpest dagger that pierced through the land of all life. At that time, Xiao Chun and the others would definitely not be able to return in time when the battle started. Moreover, with so many teleportation formations, the matter wouldn't be as easy to deal with as it had been before, because it was impossible to stop the origin world from entering the land of all life. Once the battle started, it would start directly inside the land of all life. The consequences of this were obvious. These teleportation formations were the ones that couldn't be looked down upon. As more and more teleportation formations were discovered, the mood of Xiao Chun and the others grew heavier and heavier. Although it seemed like teleportation formations had been discovered one after another, who knew how many more were hidden in the dark? No one could guarantee that the teleport formation between the origin world and the land of living beings had been eliminated. It was something that no one could say for sure. So, even though more than half a year had passed, the new cultivators had been discovered one by one. However, Xiao Chun and the others didn't relax at all. Moreover, what Xiao Chun and the others found even harder to accept was how the origin world was able to construct so many teleportation formations in the land of all beings in such a short time. Without exception, the carvings of these teleportation arrays were all completed by the forces of the land of all living beings. It could be said that they had colluded with the enemy and joined the origin world that they had once hated so much. Without the help of the forces in the land of all living beings, the origin world wouldn't have been able to carve a teleportation formation in the land of all living beings. This was because it was impossible for them to even enter the land of all life. As the saying goes, it's hard to guard against a thief in your own home day and night. The feeling of being betrayed by your own people was definitely not a good feeling. Moreover, these people were the people that Xiao Chun and the others had risked their lives to protect. However, in the end, they had chosen to betray them. In the sacred hall, Xiao Chun, Lin Yun, Mu Lingxian, Dongfang Yun, Mo He, Ancestor He, and Xiao Qing sat together with ugly expressions. This was the umpteenth time they had met in the past half a year. Although Xiao Chun and the others hadn't taken action directly, they obviously weren't having a good time. The situation has stabilized. I estimate that in a few more months, we'll be able to completely eliminate the remaining threats, said Mu Lingxian. They had spent half a year investigating the land of all living beings, and now it was finally going to end. However, no one was happy about this. Dongfang Yun said in a low voice, "This is just a temporary solution. Doing this can only treat the symptoms, but not the root of the problem. What if something like this happens again? Yes, these people miss their deceased relatives. No one can guarantee that something like this won't happen again. It's not that we can't guarantee it. It's very likely that something like this will happen again. After all, human nature is like this." Xiao Chun and the others naturally knew that up until now. What they had done couldn't be considered a success. This was because they hadn't solved the root cause of the problem at all. Just as Dongfang Yun had said, they had eliminated all the threats this time. They had dealt with all the new cultivators and the teleportation arrays. But what about the future? Who could guarantee that no one would contact the origin world again? Who could guarantee that no one would make a deal with the origin world because they missed their deceased relatives? Was it really impossible for such a thing to happen? Obviously, it wouldn't. Under such temptation, many people had already disregarded life and death. Moreover, during the investigation for half a year, many people weren't afraid of death at all. According to them, from the moment they made the choice, they already knew the result. But why did they still do it? It was very simple. It was because they wanted to see their loved ones again. As long as they could see their loved ones again, they would be satisfied. Even if they had to pay the price with their lives, they would be willing to do so. It was hard to understand, wasn't it? But when you encountered a similar situation, how could you be sure that you wouldn't make the same choice? This was what Xiao Chun and the others needed to solve. Only by solving this problem could they truly prevent such a thing from happening again, once and for all. Like I said before, we need to focus on education and enlighten the living beings. Let them understand the principle of reincarnation, said Lin Yun. Enlightening the living beings was something they definitely needed to do. However, it was a long-term process after all. It would be difficult to see the results in a short time. Everyone had already discussed this point many times. Furthermore, they had already started to implement it. Currently, the entire land of all living beings was filled with people from Sacred Temple and other major forces. They were constantly enlightening the living beings. They were telling them about the reincarnation of life and death. They were telling them to go against the heavens. After they came back from the dead, that person was no longer the person they remembered. However, it was very difficult to achieve stable results in a short time with this method alone. Xiao Chun and the others didn't have that much time right now. Everyone spoke one after another. In the end, Xiao Chun said in a deep voice, "The reason why the living beings chose to revive their loved ones and were bewitched by the origin world is because their souls have no sustenance." Hearing this, Lin Yun and the others were stunned at first. Then they looked at Xiao Chun. And Mohi even asked, "That's right. That's the reason." "Xiao Chun, since you said so, could it be that you already have a solution?" "I do have some ideas." Next, not only do we need to continue the work of enlightening the living beings, but we also need to make them understand that coming back from the dead is against the rules of the heavens. In addition, we need to build soul towers all over the land of all living beings to give their souls a home and sustenance. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 2998. Building a pagoda was a way to provide sustenance for the souls of all living beings. Everyone nodded in agreement when they heard Xiao Chen's words. It was difficult to see any results in a short period of time if they only relied on education. However, it would be a different story if they could build a pagoda. The pagoda Xiao Chen spoke of was no ordinary pagoda. It was a place that could truly enshrine souls. In other words, after a person died, their soul would quickly dissipate. Once the pagoda was built, the power of the formation within would be able to preserve a trace of the person's soul for a period of time. Then, the pagoda would create a memorial tablet for future generations to worship. Of course, this was only one of its effects. What really made Xiao Chun and the others think highly of the pagoda was that once the pagoda enshrined a trace of soul power, then, even if the origin world collected the souls of the dead, it would not be perfect. At that time, even the primogenitors would not be able to use the incomplete soul to revive the dead. This was the most important thing. It was also the real way to move around in the origin world. However, according to Xiao Chun and the others' idea, every city in the land of all living beings had to have a pagoda. This was not a small project. After all, the land of all living beings was enormous. To build a pagoda in the entire land of all living beings would definitely require a huge investment. However, even if the investment was huge, Xiao Chun and the others did not plan to give up. This was something that had to be done. Firstly, it could provide sustenance for all living beings. Secondly, it could completely prevent the origin world from reviving the dead. Although it was not useful for the new cultivators, the origin world would not be able to collect the souls of those who died in the land of all living beings. This way, things like the appearance of new cultivators in the future could be easily controlled. Lin Yun, Dongfang Yun, Mu Lingxian, and the others all agreed with Xiao Chen's suggestion. Even though it was very difficult to achieve, it was at least a feasible method. Moreover, with the Sacred Temple's wealth, it was completely possible. At most, it was a matter of time. This suggestion was quickly approved by everyone. Then, Xiao Chun and the others gave the order to start building the pagoda. The first was naturally the large cities. In these cities, the population was in the millions or even tens of millions. Such a large population was naturally the most important thing to pay attention to. Following the orders of Xiao Chun and the others, the construction of the pagoda was quickly carried out. Everything needed was provided by the temple, and the various factions were only responsible for providing manpower. Of course, there are also powerhouses from the Sacred Temple personally supervising every place to prevent the construction of the pagoda from failing to meet the standards. None of the major powers dared to go against the orders of the Divine Temple. much less reject them. At this time, Li Tian was already in charge of the construction of a spirit tower in one of the cities. As the person in charge of the formation, he was currently in charge of the largest city in the land of all living, the City of All Living. This was the largest and most populous city in the land of all living beings. There were more than 80 million people living here, and this was only the number of people in the city. In the surroundings of the City of Thousands of Lives, there were many forces and sects of various sizes. It could be said that the City of Thousands of Lives was the most prosperous place in the land of all living beings. It was also the place with the most powerhouses. Many powerhouses came and went from the City of Thousands of Lives. Not only was it the most prosperous city, but it also had the most convenient and fastest transportation. It was no exaggeration to say that as long as it was an important city in the land of all living beings, there would be a teleportation formation in the City of Thousands of Lives that could be directly connected to the land of all living beings. The importance of the City of Thousands of Lives was self-evident. This was also the reason why Li Tian was personally overseeing it. The pagoda in the City of Thousands of Lives was the largest and most luxurious of the planned pagoda. An important area in the City of Thousands of Lives had already been planned, and the construction of the pagoda had begun. Li Tian had not left this place for several days. He personally watched every part of the pagoda. As long as there was a problem, Li Tian would immediately raise it. There were hundreds of thousands of people working on the pagoda. These people were all cultivators and powerhouses from the various major factions in the area. But now they were building the pagoda. Building the pagoda is indeed a good idea. Li Tian murmured softly in his free time. Li Tian had never thought of the idea of building the pagoda. However, when he heard this idea, Li Tian's first reaction was to support it. It was indeed a very good idea. As long as this idea was implemented, the problem of the new cultivators would be completely solved. It was precisely because he knew the importance of the pagoda that Li Tian attached great importance to this matter. He took the initiative to go to the City of Thousands of Lives to supervise the construction of the pagoda. As the largest pagoda, the City of Thousands of Lives pagoda could not have any problems. Otherwise, it would be very troublesome. Time passed day by day. It had to be said that with the help of so many cultivators, the construction of the pagoda was very fast. In just 3 months, the pagoda in the City of Thousands of Lives was completed. From the outside, it looked like a very ordinary pagoda. However, the inside was completely different. To put it simply, the interior of each pagoda was a space of its own. To put it bluntly, it was a small world. The area was determined according to the size of the pagoda, but it was not small. And anyone who entered the pagoda would be tested by the pagoda through a special formation. In an instant, the corresponding bloodline could be matched and then directly transported to the ranking of their ancestors. In other words, in the pagoda, one did not have to look for the ancestral tablet that they helped. The pagoda would take care of it on its own. And if there was no ancestral tablet in the pagoda, one would definitely not be able to enter the pagoda. Therefore, the bloodline became the key to entering the pagoda. This method was also the most convenient and reliable. Of course, to be able to do this, the power of a profound formation was indispensable. Every pagoda was engraved with 999 formations. These formations were the most precious part of the pagoda. At the same time, they had to be replenished every once in a while. Otherwise, the power of these formations would be exhausted and the pagoda would naturally lose its function. It was indeed a very large project, and the maintenance work in the future was very tedious. However, this was not a problem. As for the maintenance work of the pagoda, it would naturally be handled by the sacred temple in the future. Every once in a while, people from the sacred temple would go to the various pagoda in the City of Thousands of Lives to repair and replenish the resources of the formations. They had already inspected the pagoda for possible problems. The completion of the pagoda after the pagoda was the result of Xiao Chun and the others' 3 months of hard work. With the appearance of these pagoda, the remnant souls of those who had died in vain would also have a place to stay in the future. Chapter 2999. The construction of the pagoda had eased the tense atmosphere in the land of all living beings. Of course, the main reason was that Temple's purge was nearing its end. Those who had secretly colluded with the origin world had all been killed. Thus, the atmosphere in the land of all living beings was much more relaxed. Temple wasn't a bloodthirsty person. They wouldn't attack the living beings of the world for no reason. After dealing with the new cultivators, the next thing they needed to do was to stabilize the people in the land of all living beings as soon as possible. After all, being too nervous wasn't a good thing. No one knew what kind of chaos would erupt in the end if they were constantly suppressed. That wasn't what Temple wanted to see either. Therefore, after the bloody purge at the beginning, the next step was the most crucial work of pacifying the people. The most important thing for Temple to do now was to calm the nervous emotions of the people as soon as possible. After all, no one knew when the war with the origin world would break out again. Although the origin world didn't seem to have done anything recently and seemed to have admitted defeat, the origin world wouldn't admit defeat easily. However, everyone knew that the origin world wouldn't admit defeat that easily. Moreover, with the relationship between the two sides, admitting defeat wasn't enough to end the battle. Shao Chun and the others knew this. The primogenitors naturally knew this too. Whether they admitted defeat or not, the two sides would have to fight in the end. Therefore, before the war broke out, it was necessary to ensure the stability of the land of all living beings. Li Tian and Xin Yuanling were the most suitable people to deal with this. With their abilities, it was difficult to make progress in this matter. The only thing they needed was some time. Especially after the pagoda construction was completed, it was an opportunity for the people to sense Temple's intentions. Otherwise, why would the divine temple spend so much effort to build these spiritual towers? One had to know that the construction of each pagoda was equivalent to carving a small world. Moreover, there were many formations attached to each pagoda. Even if it was just a small pagoda, the cost was enough to make people speechless. If an ordinary faction wanted to build such a pagoda, they would probably have to empty out all their wealth. Only a large faction like Temple had the capital to promote the existence of pagoda in the land of all living beings. The situation had stabilized for the time being. Shao Chun and the others were discussing the next attack on the origin world. Little Qing was obviously the most enthusiastic about this matter, but Shao Chun and the others were not in a hurry to set off. Everything would have to wait until the dust had settled on the land of all life. She still needed to wait for a while. Helpless, Shao Qing could only accept it. However, on this day, as usual, Little Qing and Shao Chun were drinking and chatting together. Since she had nothing to do, Little Qing naturally enjoyed spending time with Shao Chun. Although he had a good relationship with Lin Yan, Little Qing still preferred the feeling of being with Shao Chun. After drinking a mouthful of wine, Shao Qing casually said, "If this drags on, when will it end? Moreover, isn't this falling right into the trap of those old fellows?" Little Qing still hoped that they could attack the origin world as soon as possible and end this war once and for all. Everyone could see that the progenitors were behind what had happened in the land of all life. From the looks of it, the main purpose of these tricks was to stall for time. But what was the point of stalling for time? She really couldn't figure out why the progenitors were stalling for time. But no matter what, she couldn't let the origin world succeed. In Little Qing's opinion, she had to stop whatever the origin world wanted to do. It was such a simple principle. That was why Little Qing was so anxious to attack the origin world. Shao Chun smiled faintly. He knew that Little Qing didn't mean it. She wasn't blaming him. There's nothing we can do about it. Even if we know it's a trick of those old fellows, we can't do anything about it. We can't abandon our home, right? The progenitor's tricks could be called an overt scheme. Even if Shao Chun and the others knew everything, so what? In the end, he could only accept it. It was as if he had to suffer in silence. Unless Shao Chun and the others were willing to abandon the land of all life. But was that possible? The progenitors obviously valued this point. That was why they were so confident. They were certain that Shao Chun and the others wouldn't abandon the land of all life. That was why they were so fearless. So I forget it. Let's not talk about it. By the way, what do you want to do with the origin energy you mentioned earlier? Xiao Chen had asked little Qing if there was any origin energy. After all, the land of all life had just been built. There was no extra origin energy at the moment. If there was a place in the world with the most origin energy, it would undoubtedly be the land of creation. Xiao Chen didn't hide it when he heard little Qing's words. He smiled and said, I want my parents to break through to the World Lord realm. Xiao Qing and Bai Ruyue were both progenitor realm cultivators now. This was absolutely unimaginable in the past. But now, Xiao Chen felt that it wasn't enough. Only when one reached the World Lord realm could they achieve immortality and have no lifespan limit. Although progenitor realm experts had a long lifespan, it would be exhausted sooner or later. As a son, Xiao Chen naturally didn't want that day to come. In Xiao Chen's opinion, the family naturally had to be together forever. Therefore, it was necessary to help Xiao Qing and Bai Ruyue break through to the World Lord realm. In addition, Xiao Chen didn't expect Xiao Qing and Bai Ruyue to be very strong. Therefore, even if he had to use resources, Xiao Chen wanted to push them to the World Lord realm. Sacred Temple could take out other resources, but origin energy was the only thing Sacred Temple didn't have. Little Qing didn't think much when she heard Xiao Chen's words. She directly nodded and agreed. No problem. Although I don't have much left, it's enough for 2 people to break through. There wasn't much origin energy left in the land of creation, but it was still enough. Xiao Chen smiled in response. Thank you very much. It's a small matter. If you really want to thank me, solve the land of creation as soon as possible. We can't delay the matter of the origin world any longer to avoid trouble. Little Qing glanced at Xiao Chen and said. Little Qing and Xiao Chen were getting along very easily now. There wasn't any barrier between them, so they spoke very casually. Xiao Chen smiled and said, That's right. Soon. With that said, Xiao Chen took the initiative to raise his glass and clinked it with Little Qing's. Just as the 2 of them finished drinking, an expert from Sacred Temple walked in. He bowed respectfully to Xiao Chen and Little Qing. Then, he didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Divine Ancestor, something happened. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 3000. Xiao Chen's expression froze after hearing what the Mighty One from the Sage Hall said. What could possibly happen in the Sage Hall? However, Xiao Chen still asked when he saw that person's solemn expression. What is it? Sacred Master, the primogenitors of the origin world have sent their soul clones to the main hall. They said they want to see you. Those old fellows are here? Xiao Chen and Little Qing exchanged glances when they heard that. Their eyes were filled with confusion. Why would the primogenitors send their soul clones to the land of living under such circumstances? Although they didn't come with their true bodies, a soul clone was already strange enough. They couldn't figure out the intentions of those old fellows, but their instincts told Xiao Chen and Xiao Qing that those old fellows definitely didn't come with good intentions. What are those old fellows trying to do now? Little Qing couldn't help but curse. She absolutely didn't believe that those old fellows would have any good intentions at this time. All right, no matter what, let's go and take a look first. It's just a soul clone anyway. The primogenitors had sent their soul clones, so they obviously weren't here to attack the land of living. That was because the soul clones didn't possess any offensive power at all. Any cultivator could easily destroy them. Under normal circumstances, soul clones were only used by some almighties to communicate with each other. Little Qing didn't say anything after hearing Xiao Chen's words. They definitely had to go and take a look. The 2 of them stood up and vanished on the spot. It was as if they had never appeared. In the next instant, Xiao Chen and Little Qing appeared in the main hall. Lin Yun and the others had arrived before the 2 of them. Moreover, Ancestor Qing and Ancestor Qiu's soul clones were standing proudly in the main hall. Only their soul clones had appeared. The other primogenitors didn't seem to be present. Xiao Chen didn't ask about it. He just smiled faintly. What's the occasion today? To have you 2 primogenitors grace us with your presence. Isn't the land of all beings honored by your presence? His words were filled with sarcasm. Anyone could tell that he wasn't welcoming them. The green ancestor and the Qiu ancestor weren't mindful at all. The green ancestor chuckled. Xiao Chun, people say that a scholar who has been away for 3 days must be looked at with new eyes. You really did it. Not at all. Compared to you, Ancestor Qing, I'm afraid I'm still far behind, especially when it comes to playing with people's hearts. This can't be considered as playing around. It's merely the choice of all living beings. This old man once said that all living beings are foolish, but none of you listened. All right, if you have something to say, just say it. There's no need to be so secretive. He was no longer interested in chatting with Ancestor Qing and Little Qing. As for Little Qing, she didn't say a word from beginning to end. However, his expression was cold as he stared at the 2 soul clones. He wanted nothing more than to shatter them. However, even if he destroyed the soul doppelganger, it would not affect Qing Zhu and Qiu Zhu at all. There was no need to do so, Xiao Chun said straightforwardly. Hearing this, Qiu Zhu smiled helplessly. Xiao Chun, we're here to make peace. Make peace? They had never thought that Qiu Zhu would say something like that. At this moment, the origin world wanted to make peace. Everyone looked at each other. Dongfang Yin took the lead and sneered. Make peace? That's ridiculous. Have you become senile? Do we still have the possibility of making peace? No one believed Qiu Zhu's nonsense. What peace talk? This was simply impossible. Even if Xiao Chun and the others agreed, Little Qing would not agree, because Little Qing had to eliminate the primogenitors to be the true world spirit. The one who had the strongest reaction was Little Qing. Her eyes were filled with killing intent as she smiled and said, Get lost. Scram. You don't have to embarrass yourself with such boring tricks. The battle had progressed to this stage. Countless universes had been destroyed. Only 3 worlds still had living beings. Even if the battle had just begun and the battle hadn't broken out, there was absolutely no possibility of making peace. It was simply impossible. Qiu Zhu didn't seem to be surprised by Xiao Chun and Little Qing's reactions. He continued, Xiao Chun, I think you've misunderstood. The peace I'm talking about is only with your land of all beings. It doesn't include the land of creation. You know the relationship between us and the world spirit. I also know that we must fight to the death with the world spirit. So, my meaning is very simple. I want to make peace with your land of all beings. As long as you don't interfere with the matter between us and the world spirit, I can guarantee that the origin world will absolutely not interfere with your land of all beings. Moreover, Xiao Chun, it's completely unnecessary for you to forcefully interfere. You won't gain anything. Everyone knows that the land of all beings is independent of the world spirit. Even the world spirit can't interfere with the land of all beings. So, it doesn't matter to you who the world spirit is. It won't affect you at all. As long as you nod, I can make a heavenly oath that I won't interfere with your land of all beings. Little Qing's expression turned even uglier after hearing Qiu Zhu's words. He was clearly trying to drive a wedge between them. There was no possibility of reconciliation between the progenitors and Little Qing. There would be a battle in the end. However, it was different from Xiao Chun and the others. Xiao Chun and the others were the progenitors of all beings. Their strength didn't come from the world. Moreover, at Xiao Chun and the others' level, the world didn't have any ability to restrict them. Therefore, it didn't matter to them who the world spirit was. In other words, the spirit of the world could be Xiao Qing or the progenitors. It turned out that their goal was to drive a wedge between the land of all beings and the land of creation so that the origin world could focus on dealing with Little Qing. Based on the current situation, Little Qing definitely wasn't a match for the progenitors without the help of Xiao Chun and the others. Just the world destroyer alone was enough to give Little Qing a headache. Adding the progenitors to the mix, there was no way she could fight. A dog can't change its habit of eating shit. You're still trying to drive a wedge between us so that you can defeat us one by one? Don't forget that your origin world still has the world destroyer. At that time, if you destroy the land of creation, do you think the land of all beings can remain unscathed? Little Qing sneered. She seemed to be refuting Qiu Zhu's words, but she was actually telling Xiao Chun and the others. Don't underestimate the progenitors. What you're saying now sounds nice, but what about when the time comes? Moreover, the origin world still has the world destroyer. At that time, can you deal with the world destroyer without me? Also, once these old fellows obtain my strength, their strength will definitely skyrocket. At that time, can a mere oath restrain them? Please add, please vote, please recommend. Chapter 3001. Little Qing seemed calm, but every word he said was a warning to Xiao Chun and the others. Now that they were facing the origin world, they could only win if they worked together. Once they were divided, they could only wait to be defeated one by one. In response, Xiao Chun just smiled and nodded at Little Qing. He knew what Little Qing meant and understood the logic behind it. Moreover, if Qing Zhu and Xiao Zhu thought they could sway them with just a few words, they were too naive. The land of living beings didn't have any irreconcilable enmity with the origin world, but Xiao Chun also understood that he couldn't just watch the primogenitors kill Little Qing. Therefore, Xiao Chun and the others didn't believe Qing Zhu and Xiao Zhu at all. Little Qing heaved a sigh of relief when he saw Xiao Chun smile. In fact, he was too nervous. Qing Zhu and Xiao Zhu didn't seem too disappointed when they saw that Xiao Chun and the others weren't swayed at all by their words. From the beginning, they knew that it was impossible to sway Xiao Chun and the others with just a few words. How could it be so easy? Moreover, Xiao Chun and the others weren't that naive. Xiao Chun smiled faintly when his plan to sow discord between the two sides failed. If the two of you came here just to say this, then to be honest, I'm afraid I'll have to disappoint you. Xiao Chun's words made his intentions clear. Xiao Zhu shook his head and Qing Zhu smiled faintly. I knew it would end like this. The two of them were very calm and didn't seem disappointed at all. It was as though they didn't expect to succeed. Xiao Chun and Lin Yun looked at each other when they saw their expressions. For a moment, they were puzzled. Since Qing Zhu and Xiao Zhu didn't come here with any hope of success, then what were they doing here? Or maybe they didn't come here for this at all. What other purpose did they have? If they didn't come to sow discord between the two sides, then why? For a moment, Xiao Chun was puzzled. Qing Zhu smiled faintly, as if he had seen through Xiao Chun's thoughts. There's no need to make wild guesses. What I said just now was just a casual remark. We old fellows aren't that naive. Was it just a casual remark? Those words just now weren't the purpose of Ancestor Qing and the other two coming here? In that case, why had the two of them come to the land of all life? Suddenly, a sense of uneasiness rose in the depths of his heart. His gaze turned cold as he stared at Qing Zhu and Xiao Zhu. Qing Zhu said calmly in the face of Xiao Chen's cold stare, "Actually, we do want to sow discord between you two, but it seems that the possibility of success is very low. So, we came up with another method. Sowing discord between the two of you is to allow us old folks to better deal with the land of creation. So now," at this point, Xiao Chun seemed to have guessed something. However, before he could react, he suddenly sensed something from the spiritual avatars of Qing Zhu and Xiao Zhu. Two beams of light soared into the sky and instantly enveloped the entire sacred hall. Under the envelopment of the light, the space around the sacred hall was imprisoned. Upon seeing this, Lin Yun's expression sank. Ritual array. The ritual array that appeared out of nowhere sealed the entire sacred hall. At this moment, Xiao Chen's group finally understood the purpose of Qing Zhu and the other two. They came here to cast a ritual array to seal the sacred hall and trap everyone. As for their purpose, it was most likely to attack the land of creation. As long as they trapped Xiao Chen's group, no one would go to the land of creation to rescue them. Under such circumstances, it could be said that with the power of the origin world, it wouldn't be a problem to take down the land of creation. From the beginning, the goal of the origin world wasn't the land of all life, but the land of creation. With a gentle tap of his finger, Xiao Chun shattered Qing Zhu's spiritual avatar. But shortly after, Qing Zhu's spiritual avatar coalesced again. Looking at this scene, Xiao Chun frowned slightly. As expected, this isn't a spiritual avatar, but the power of the ritual array. Previously, they thought it was Qing Zhu and Xiao Zhu's spiritual avatars. But now, it seemed that it wasn't the case at all. The Qing Zhu and Qiu Zhu in front of them were merely condensed from the power of the ritual array. The power of the ritual array was connected to their bodies. Upon seeing Qing Zhu's reappearance after being defeated, Lin Yun, Dongfang Yun, Imo He, He Zhu, and Mu Lingxian's expressions turned ugly. They didn't expect these old things to be so cunning. Moreover, they had never seen this ritual array before. It wasn't an ordinary ritual array. Clearly, it was another trump card of the Origin World's primogenitors. Moreover, the ritual array's grade was definitely not low. It could even be said that it was the most advanced ritual array that they had ever seen. Damn it! Little Qing cursed inwardly. The purpose of using the ritual array to trap the sacred hall and prevent everyone from leaving was to attack the land of creation. In that case, these old things were probably already on their way to attack the land of creation. Without Xiao Chun and the others guarding the place, the land of creation naturally wouldn't be able to withstand the attacks of these old guys. Little Qing's figure flashed and instantly disappeared from the hall. She came to the outside world and directly attacked the ritual array. She wanted to break the ritual array with brute force. However, facing Little Qing's all-out attack, the ritual array didn't have the slightest reaction other than ripples. It was like a stone falling into the water. Other than that, there was no other change. It blocked. The ritual array blocked Little Qing's all-out attack. Seeing that, Little Qing didn't give up and continued to attack. As a spirit of heaven and earth, each of her attacks had the power to destroy heaven and earth. However, under the obstruction of the ritual array, her attacks seemed to have lost all their power. There wasn't the slightest bit of offensive power. She couldn't break it. She couldn't break it. Xiao Qing actually couldn't break this array formation. Seeing that, Qing Zhu said with a smile, "Don't waste your energy. Since we're able to set up this ritual array, it naturally won't be broken so easily. Of course, with your strength, this ritual array won't be able to trap you for too long. If you give it your all, you should be able to break it forcefully in 5 to 6 days. However, by that time, the matter of the land of creation would probably be over." Naturally, they didn't think that the ritual array could trap Xiao Chun and the others for too long. After all, at their level, no ritual array could trap Xiao Chun and the others forever. However, 5 to 6 days was enough. By then, the land of creation would be destroyed. Even if Xiao Chun and the others broke free from the ritual array, what could they do? Begging for your collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 3002. 5 or 6 days seemed very short, but it was enough time to change many things, such as the destruction of the land of creation. Hearing Ancestor Qing's words, Mo, he angrily attacked. However, no matter how he attacked, Ancestor Qing and Ancestor Mu's bodies would reappear. His attacks were useless against them. In other words, their images were connected to the formation. As long as the formation wasn't destroyed, he couldn't cause any substantial harm to them. Emohi's expression became increasingly gloomy as he couldn't break through the two's influence. In the end, it was Xiao Chun who spoke. "All right, there's no point in doing this." He motioned for Emohi to calm down. This kind of attack had no effect on Qing Zhu and Qiu Zhu at all. It even seemed to be playing to the gallery. Emohi calmed down after hearing Xiao Chen's words. Meanwhile, Xiao Chen calmed down and looked at Qing Zhu and Qiu Zhu calmly. "I'm very curious. How exactly did you guys set up the formation in the land of creation?" This was what Xiao Chen was most concerned about. After all, this was the land of creation, their territory. It was indeed somewhat inconceivable that the primogenitors had been able to set up such a formation in the sacred palace without anyone noticing, unless there were spies from the origin realm in the sacred palace. However, that was even more impossible. If the primogenitors had planted spies in the sacred palace or bought people's hearts, then Xiao Chun and the others would be too much of a failure. They had directly let the spies attack the root of the problem. However, if no one coordinated with them, how had the primogenitors set up such a formation? It had to be known that even Doomsday wouldn't be able to enter the land of creation without anyone noticing, let alone the primogenitors. Not to mention, they had directly entered the sacred palace and set up a formation right under the noses of Xiao Chun and the others. Therefore, Xiao Chun was even more curious about how the formation had appeared. Qing Zhu didn't conceal it. He smiled and said, "Actually, the formation appeared long ago. You just didn't notice it. Those teleportation formations?" As soon as he said that, Xiao Chun immediately thought of those teleportation formations. The teleportation formations that had been scattered all over the land of creation because of the new cultivators. Ancestor Qing nodded and said, "That's right. It's those teleportation arrays." Speaking of this, Xiao Chun suddenly understood. He smiled helplessly and shook his head. "I see." At first, Xiao Chun and the others thought that the teleportation formations were just ordinary teleportation formations and that the primogenitors had asked them to inscribe these teleportation formations only because they were a threat to the land of all beings. When necessary, they could use these teleportation formations to directly enter the land of all beings. However, he didn't expect that this wasn't the case at all. The primogenitors had never thought of using those teleportation formations for teleportation because they had heard of teleportation formations before. So what if they entered the land of all living beings? Destroy the land of all living beings? But what was the result? It was very likely that they would be wiped out here by Xiao Chun and the others. However, it was clear that the primogenitors had given up on fighting to the death. They were ambitious. What they wanted was to win, not to perish together with Xiao Chun. Therefore, the hundreds of teleportation formations actually had other uses. They were the foundation of the teleportation formation before them. Xiao Chun and the others had destroyed those teleportation formations, but under the cover of the teleportation formations, the foundation of the formation remained. Although they didn't know what method the primogenitors had used, this was the truth. There was no way to refute or deny it. The teleportation formations were just a smokescreen. The primogenitors' true goal was here. From the very beginning, what they wanted to destroy wasn't the land of all beings. By the time they realized everything, it was already a little too late. Xiao Chun and the others had already fallen for the primogenitors' scheme. It wasn't just Xiao Chun. Lin Yun, Xianyuan Ling, Dongfang Yun, Ancestor He, and Mo, he were also speechless. They hadn't expected that they had fallen for the trap from the very beginning. The primogenitors' scheme was also closely linked and could be said to be flawless. From the moment the new martialists appeared, the primogenitors had already planned everything up to this point. From the looks of it, the entire plan could be said to be perfect. I really learned something. It looks like you're already on your way to the land of all beings, right? Indeed. After spending so much effort, Xiao Chun also guessed where the primogenitors were now. Ancestor Qing didn't hide it from him. After all, even if Xiao Chun and the others knew, what could they do? They were already trapped by the formation. After saying that, Qing Zhu chuckled. "However, I see that many of your primordial spirits aren't in the sacred hall. They aren't trapped. Why don't you let them try to rescue the land of all beings?" Ancestor Qing actually encouraged Xiao Chun and the others to send people to rescue the land of all beings. The primordial spirits he mentioned were naturally Xianyuan Ling, Long Qing, Li Tian, Tyrant, Taoist, and the others. Due to the construction of the pagoda, they weren't in the sacred hall. In order to trap Xiao Chun and the others, the formation wasn't large. It only trapped the sacred hall's area. However, after hearing Ancestor Qing's words, Xiao Chun smiled and shook his head. Let them go to their deaths. Ancestor Qing naturally wouldn't be so kind as to let Li Tian, Xianyuan Ling, and the others go to rescue the land of all beings while Xiao Chun and the others were trapped. That was simply impossible. It could even be said that the primogenitors couldn't wait for Xiao Chun to do that. This was because once Xianyuan Ling and Li Tian went, they definitely wouldn't be able to return. They would definitely be killed by the primogenitors. Without Xiao Chun and the others, Li Tian and the others would only be sending themselves to their deaths. Xiao Chun immediately saw through Ancestor Qing's thoughts. Ancestor Qing wasn't upset that Shao Chun had exposed him. Instead, he smiled. It was obvious that such a clumsy plan wouldn't work on Shao Chun. After saying what needed to be said, Shao Chun stood up and said to Ancestor Qing and Xiao Zhu, "Since you know everything, the next step is to break the formation. You don't have to use the formation's power to maintain it anymore. There's nothing else to say anyway." After saying that, Shao Chun ignored Ancestor Qing and Xiao Zhu and directly left the main hall. The influence of these two people was maintained by the formation's power, so they couldn't move at all. They also didn't have any attack power. There was no need to pay attention to them. As long as the formation was broken, the influence of these two people would naturally disappear. Following Shao Chen's departure, Lin Yun, Dongfang Yun, and the others also disappeared from the main hall one after another. At the same time, Ancestor Qing and Xiao Zhu's influence also slowly dissipated. In the starry sky near the land of all beings, Ancestor Qing and Xiao Zhu, who were originally sitting cross-legged with their eyes closed, slowly opened their eyes. Ancestor Qing even had a smile on his face. "Please collect, please vote, please recommend." Chapter 3003. A smile hung at the corner of his mouth. Up until now, everything had been going according to plan. Shao Chun and the others were indeed trapped by the matrix of the moment. These guys are really difficult to deal with. Although that was what he said, Qing Zhu's expression was one of complete relaxation. Ancestor Qiao, who was at the side, did not respond. Instead, Ancestor Mu spoke. "Not bad. Let's take down the land of creation first." Although little Qing was not in the land of creation this time, the primogenitors could not attack little Qing directly. However, if they could destroy the land of creation, it would be a big blow to Shao Chun, little Qing, and the others. Destroying the land of creation was equivalent to destroying little Qing's foundation. By then, the primogenitors would only need to focus on the land of all living beings. Moreover, the land of creation still had Old Tree with spirit and other ancient living beings. Without little Qing, Shao Chun, and the others' help, the primogenitors could kill Old Tree and the others. Losing a few ancient living beings would be a huge blow to Shao Chun and the others. It would greatly weaken Shao Chun and the others' strength. The primogenitors had planned everything from the beginning. Now, they were about to succeed. Even the primogenitors could not help but feel excited. On the other hand, Shao Chun and the others looked at the formation in front of them and tried several times. Even with everyone's strength, they could not break it directly. "Looks like it won't be solved in a short time," Lin Yun said helplessly. The formation was probably as Ancestor Qing and Ancestor Mu said. Even Shao Chun and the others would need at least a few days to break it. However, there was no time. The land of creation would probably be destroyed in a few days. No one stopped them. Given the progenitors' power, it was too easy for them to destroy a world. "Husband, what do we do now?" Qin Shiru and the others asked anxiously when they saw Shao Chun and the others were helpless. Qin Shiru and the others were naturally alerted by such a big event, but there was nothing they could do to help. Even Shao Chun couldn't break the formation in a short time, let alone Qin Shiru and the others. Shao Chun said as he looked around the array formation. "This array seems to be blocking sound transmissions. I'm afraid we won't be able to communicate with the outside world." That was indeed the case. Under the cover of the formation, Shao Chun and the others had no way of communicating with the outside world, so they couldn't notify anyone else. In other words, Li Tian, Xinyuan Ling, and the others were probably still unaware of what had happened in the Sacred Hall. After all, under the cover of the array, the Sacred Hall looked no different from usual from the outside. Since they couldn't contact the outside world, Shao Chun and the others couldn't inform the Old Tree and the Wood Spirit to evacuate. Given the current situation, if there was a way to inform Old Tree and the others, even if the land of creation was destroyed, Old Tree and the others should be able to escape. But now, there was no way to inform them in advance. Old Tree and the others were defenseless, and they could only wait until the primogenitors arrived at the land of creation. When that time came, it wouldn't be so easy for Old Tree and the others to escape. Damn it, what do we do now? Emoji couldn't hold back his anger and shouted angrily. Find the array base first and start destroying it from there. That's the fastest way, Little Ching replied. As a spirit of heaven and earth, Little Ching was the strongest, but she didn't have a deep understanding of array formations. Therefore, if they wanted to break the formation, they could only use the simplest method, and that was to find the array base. Any array formation needed an array base. Otherwise, it would be impossible to inscribe the array formation. Previously, Ancestor Ching had said that the array base of this great array was actually the hundreds of teleportation arrays hidden in the land of all living beings. The array base was the energy that maintained the operation of the array formation. The primogenitors were very smart. They had placed the array base outside the array formation. This way, after everyone was trapped, they couldn't destroy the array base immediately. They could only wait for the array base's energy to be completely exhausted, and the array formation would dissipate on its own. Based on the current situation, it would definitely require an enormous amount of energy to maintain the array formation that could block Xiao Chun and the others. Therefore, it was obvious that they wouldn't be able to maintain it for long. But the array base is outside the array formation. We can't leave the array formation, so how are we going to destroy the array base? Ancestor He said helplessly when he heard Little Ching's words. That's right, they couldn't leave the array formation at all. How are they going to destroy the array base? Xiao Chun said, if we go all out, we should be able to send one person out. However, that person's cultivation can only be at the ancestor realm at most. Xiao Chun and the others' cultivations were too high. It was impossible for them to force their way out of the array formation. However, if they were to join forces, they would be able to temporarily tear a hole in the array formation. Although this hole wouldn't be enough for Xiao Chun and the others to leave, it would be enough for an ancestor realm cultivator to leave. After this person left, they could go directly to Li Tian, Xin Yuanling, and the others and ask them to destroy the array base outside. They didn't need to destroy all of it. As long as they could destroy some of it, the power of the array formation would definitely weaken, and Xiao Chun and the others would be able to forcefully blast open the array formation. Hearing Xiao Chen's words, everyone nodded in agreement. This was indeed the only way now. However, who should they send? Qin Shiru and the others were originally the best choice, but now, all of them were world lords. Their cultivation was too high, so they didn't meet the requirements. In the end, after some discussion, they decided to let Xiao Chen's father, Xiao Qing, go. Firstly, Xiao Qing's cultivation happened to be at the ancestor realm. Secondly, Xiao Qing's identity was the most suitable. Father, go directly to Big Brother after you go out. Be careful along the way. It wasn't considered dangerous, but Xiao Chun still reminded him. Hearing this, Xiao Qing nodded confidently. Don't worry, I can still handle such a small matter. All right, everyone, let's do it. There's no time to lose. With that, Xiao Chun and the others attacked with all their might, and a terrifying power instantly poured on the array formation. Just as Xiao Chun thought, under the joint attack of everyone, a small hole was indeed torn open in the array formation. Go quickly. Seeing this, Xiao Chun said in a deep voice. The crack couldn't last for too long, and Xiao Qing had to hurry out. Hearing this, Xiao Qing didn't waste any time. In a flash, he rushed out of the array formation through the crack and went straight to the city where Xin Yuanling was as previously said. After successfully sending Xiao Qing out of the array formation, the next step was to wait for Xin Yuanling and the others to destroy the array base outside. Everyone let out a breath of turbid air. Just now, everyone didn't hold back. Now that they succeeded, it was inevitable that they would collapse. Now it's up to Father. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 3004. Looking at Xiao Qing's departing figure, Xiao Chun smiled and shook his head. There was nothing they could do now. He could only wait for his father's progress. Xiao Chun smiled, and comforted by Ryue when he turned to look at her. Don't worry. Father will be fine. There's no danger. I know. Ryua naturally knew that there was no danger. After all, this was the land of all living beings. Moreover, Xiaoqing was now at the progenitor realm. Putting aside his combat strength, at least his cultivation was there. It was enough to protect his life in the land of all living beings. Xiaoqing rushed out of the formation and rushed to the city where Xianyuanling was. It only took him a little more than 2 hours to arrive. Because he knew that time was of the essence, Xiaoqing did not care about the consumption of his spirit power. Xiaoqing had consumed a lot of spirit power by the time he arrived at Xianyuanling City. Why are you here? Seeing Xiaoqing appear, Xianyuanling was also shocked. He immediately asked with concern as he took the initiative to help Xiaoqing walk to the main hall. He wanted Xiaoqing to inform him, but Xiaoqing had no intention of doing so. He immediately told him about Sacred Hall. Something happened to Sacred Hall. Xianyuanling did not react at first. He thought, what could have happened to Sacred Hall? Moreover, Xiaoqing had come in person and seemed so anxious. Soon, Xianyuanling learned the whole story from Xiaoqing's narration. At this moment, Xianyuanling's expression became solemn. Sacred Hall has been trapped by the progenitors with a formation. Third brother and the others can't come out? That's right. Moreover, the origin world's goal is the land of creation. The purpose of trapping Chun, and the others is to prevent them from rescuing them. Now, you have to destroy the formation's foundation. The foundation is the teleportation formation that we found earlier. Chun, and the others can only escape by destroying the formation. Xiaoqing said anxiously. Xianyuanling did not expect that the teleportation formation they found earlier was actually the foundation of this formation. From the beginning, those old things in the origin world had been deliberately setting up a formation to mislead them so that they would not discover their true goal. That made sense. Compared to the chaos in the land of living beings, it was clear that directly destroying the land of creation would be more cost-effective. Causing chaos in the land of all living beings was just chaos. However, if the land of creation was destroyed, the result would be completely different. Unable to care about crossing the line, Xianyuanling directly called the two maids over. Serve my father well. I will contact the others now. He told Xiaoqing to rest at ease and that he would deal with the rest. Xiaoqing did not refuse. His mission had been completed. Next, it was up to Xianyuanling and the others. Moreover, with Xianyuanling's ability, he believed that he could handle this matter well. After settling Xiaoqing down, Xianyuanling directly flew away and rushed towards the nearest teleportation array. He even contacted Li Tian along the way. Li Tian was currently in Myriad Life City. After receiving Xianyuanling's message, he was similarly extremely shocked. I didn't expect that we would be tricked by the origin world. We didn't even notice it. All right, enough of this nonsense. The most important thing now is to get rid of those array bases as soon as possible. All right, I will set off now. Also, inform the others and let them work together. We will try to destroy the array in the shortest time possible. Xianyuanling, Li Tian, and the others began to move. They already knew the location of those teleportation arrays. Even now, there were people guarding them. This saved them a lot of effort. They only needed to destroy them directly. They rushed to the nearest teleportation array. This teleportation array had actually been destroyed long ago. Xianyuanling did not think much about it before, but now, looking at the destroyed teleportation array, he frowned. After sizing it up carefully, Xianyuanling finally found a black stone in the teleportation formation. It was about the size of a fist, but the power it contained was incomparably vast. So it's this thing. This was the array base. Previously, he did not pay attention to it and thought that it was just an ordinary stone. However, it seemed that this thing was not simple. Without thinking much, he directly destroyed the black stone. In an instant, the array base also lost its function. Li Tian, the black stone is the array base. Destroy it. He told Li Tian about his discovery. However, Li Tian had already discovered it. I already knew. Tell monk and Taoist so that they won't be able to find it. The array bases were destroyed one by one. Xin Yuanling, Li Tian, and the others moved quickly without any delay. As the array bases were destroyed one after another, Xiao Chun and the others in the Sacred Hall also felt that the power of the array was weakening bit by bit. "It seems that they have started to move," Lin Yan said. "Faster," Little Qing said helplessly when she heard that. There was not enough time. She did not know if the primogenitors had reached the place of creation. If the array was not broken now, it would really be too late. After all, it would take time for Xiao Chun and the others to rush to the place of creation after breaking the array. Little Qing did not want to see the place of creation in ruins by the time she reached it. However, it was useless to be anxious now. She still had to wait for Xin Yuanling and the others' progress. They had only destroyed a few array bases, so it did not affect them much. Moreover, Xiao Chun and the others did not have a way to directly break the array. While Xiao Chun and the others were racing against time to break the array, on the other side of the place of creation, the army of the origin world arrived without any warning. It was not a reliable army because there were not many people who came this time. There were only the primogenitors, World Devastator, Hu Huang, and the others. There were also tens of thousands of experts from the origin world. Although there were not many people, they were very strong. They could be said to be the most elite force in the origin world. As the origin world's spatial spirit ship approached, Old Tree and the others in the place of creation naturally noticed it immediately. "Did you inform the world spirit?" Old Tree, with Spirit, and the others gathered together. Old Tree asked. Old Tree naturally chose to inform Little Qing immediately when the people from the origin world arrived. However, Wood Spirit shook her head helplessly. "I can't contact her. I've tried all kinds of methods, but I still can't contact her." Old Tree felt that something was wrong when he could not contact Little Qing. His heart sank. How could there be such a coincidence in the world? Little Qing just happened to be uncontactable when the origin world attacked. Old Tree did not believe that it was a coincidence. It was obvious that the origin world was behind all this. It was very likely that something had happened to Little Qing. That was why they could not contact each other. Things are getting a little troublesome. I think we can escape this time. Please collect, vote, recommend. Chapter 3005. The sudden attack of the origin world made Old Tree, with Spirit, and the others look solemn. Especially now, Little Green wasn't in the land of creation and they couldn't contact her. This made Old Tree and the others even more anxious. They couldn't contact Little Green for no reason, and the origin world was attacking at this time. No one would believe that these two things weren't related. Now is not the time to think about it. We have to think of a way to stop the origin world. At this moment, the Stone Spirit Patriarch said. It was meaningless to discuss this since they couldn't contact Little Green. If they couldn't stop the attack of the origin world, the entire land of creation would be in danger of being destroyed. Hearing this, Old Tree, with Spirit, and the others nodded in agreement. However, it was really difficult for them to stop the origin world. They didn't know how many forces the origin world had sent this time. If the primogenitors didn't come personally, they might still have the strength to fight. However, if the primogenitors came personally and Little Green wasn't there, it would be really difficult to fight this battle. It could even be said that they didn't have a chance to win. However, they couldn't run away because once they ran away, the fate of the land of creation was imaginable. Moreover, even if they ran away, it would be very difficult to do so. It was a dead end no matter how they looked at it. While Old Tree and the others were thinking of solution, dozens of spatial spirit ships from the origin world were rapidly approaching the land of creation. Ancestor Qing, Ancestor Mu, Ancestor Qiu, and the other primogenitors also came to the deck of the spatial spirit ship. Looking at the land of creation from afar, Ancestor Qing said indifferently, "Everyone, let's do it. We can't waste time." He didn't want to waste time. Although Little Green and Xiao Chun were successfully trapped, no one knew how long the formation could last. Although the prediction was that it could last for 4 to 5 days, it was just a prediction. No one knew the actual situation. Just in case, they had to destroy the land of creation as soon as possible. Of course, they also had to kill the ancient creatures like Old Tree and the others. If they could kill a group of ancient creatures, the pressure on the origin world would be reduced in the battle with Shao Chun and the others. Hearing Ancestor Qing's words, the other primogenitors didn't have any objection. Only World Annihilation said lazily, "This is the land of creation, the beginning of the world? It's nothing special. Plus, there doesn't seem to be any experts. You guys can play by yourselves this time." In the eyes of the World Destroyer, the strength of the Old Tree and the others were simply way too weak. Even if they were ancient-era living beings, they were still far from enough. World Annihilation was not interested in fighting such opponents. The primogenitors didn't say anything. Even now, they couldn't command Armageddon to do anything. This was also the most awkward thing after creating the Armageddon. He had great power, but he couldn't really control it. To put it bluntly, it was like a double-edged sword. It could hurt the enemy, but it could also hurt the user. The only thing that was better than before was that after the persuasion of the primogenitors, Armageddon now knew what to do. Whether it was for himself or the ancestors, the apocalypse world had to be tied to the origin world. This was the only piece of news that was not too bad. The primogenitors didn't say much about World Destroyer's unwillingness to fight. It didn't matter if World Destroyer fought or not. Just the primogenitors alone were enough. Hence, ignoring World Annihilation's attitude, Ancestor Qing and the others chose to attack. His figure flashed, and he instantly vanished from the deck. At the same time, numerous experts from the origin world flew out from the other spatial spirit ships. This time, the primogenitors only had one goal, and that was to destroy the land of creation. As soon as he arrived, he immediately attacked. His terrifying attack instantly headed straight for the place of creation. At the level of the primogenitors, it was not difficult for them to destroy a world. Even a land of creation would not be able to withstand such a huge attack. It was as if doomsday had arrived. Just as the primogenitors were about to strike, the Old Tree, Mu Ling, and the rest of the primogenitors were about to strike. Unfortunately, their resistance wasn't enough to completely eliminate the attacks of the primogenitors. The land of creation was heavily damaged in the first round of attacks. I thought you guys were hiding and didn't dare to come out. The primogenitors weren't surprised by the sudden appearance of Old Tree, Mu Ling, and the others. Instead, they sneered. Seeing the 8 primogenitors appear in front of them, Mu Ling, Old Tree, and the others' hearts sank to the bottom. The 8 primogenitors had arrived together. It seemed like they really wanted to destroy the land of creation in one fell swoop. The glimmer of hope they had was gone. They couldn't defeat them. This was the only thought in Old Tree, Mu Ling, and the others' minds. They were no match for the 8 primogenitors. The gap between them was so big that they couldn't make up for it through other means. "Let's go." Old Tree transmitted his voice to Mu Ling and the others without thinking too much. From the looks of it, they couldn't defend the land of creation. It would be a miracle if they could keep their lives. Hence, Old Tree told Mu Ling and the others to leave. However, Ancestor Mu sneered in response. "Don't you think you're dreaming if you want to escape now?" He didn't hear Old Tree and the others' conversation, but he could guess what they were thinking. Old Tree and the others had no chance of escaping before, let alone now. It was extremely difficult to escape from the hands of the primogenitors. Where's the spirit of heaven and earth? Old Tree didn't answer Ancestor Mu. Instead, he asked. He didn't think the spirit of heaven and earth could be killed by the primogenitors. Perhaps the primogenitors had used some means to trap the spirit of heaven and earth, preventing it from arriving immediately. Ancestor Mu chuckled. Who knows? Maybe it's already dead. Huh, do you think that's possible? Do you think you can kill the spirit of heaven and earth? So what if I can or can't? In any case, you're all dead now. No one can save you. Cut the crap and prepare to die. Ancestor Mu was about to attack. Old Tree took a step forward and stood in front of Mu Ling and the others. At the same time, green light shone from his body. Soon, he transformed into his original form, which was a gigantic ancient tree. The ancient tree seemed to cover the entire land of creation. It became a barrier that protected the land of creation. After doing all that, Old Tree told Mu Ling and the others to leave as soon as possible. Old Tree fought with his life on the line. He even burned his blood essence. To him, who didn't have much time left, he was determined to die. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. End of chapter. Chapter 3006. The old tree had used all of his strength to form a final line of defense. Burning his essence blood was indeed the best he could do, given that he was nearing the end of his lifespan. To put it bluntly, even if the old tree didn't die in the battle, he wouldn't be able to live for much longer. His lifespan was almost depleted. Moreover, even if the old tree was going all out to protect the land of creation, it was nothing more than a joke in the eyes of the other progenitors. He didn't have the power to protect the land of creation. The old tree that seemed to blot out the sky was actually so weak that it couldn't even withstand a single blow from the other progenitors. Of course, the old tree understood this. He was only doing this to buy time for its spirit and the others. He wanted them to escape successfully. There was no way he could protect the land of creation. At the very least, he wanted Wood Spirit and the others to survive. Old Tree, Wood Spirit and the others looked at the old tree with complicated expressions. How could they not know what the old tree was thinking? Hurry up and leave. To this, the old tree only replied with one sentence. After living for so many years, this was the most he could do in the end. The other progenitors didn't react in the slightest. Their expressions were as calm as ever. Ancestor Mu sneered as he looked at the old tree. "Old man, is this the place you've chosen to end up?" The progenitors naturally recognized the old tree. After all, he'd been around for far too long. Back when the progenitors were born and hadn't yet escaped the land of creation, the old tree had already been around. However, at that time, he was only a small sapling. Even his spiritual intelligence was only in the beginning stages. After so many years, the old tree's lifespan was nearing its end. If it weren't for little Qing, he would have died long ago. Upon hearing Patriarch Mu's words, the old tree snorted. Why waste your breath? Let's just do it. Fine, I'll give you a quick death today, Patriarch Mu said indifferently. They were old acquaintances of the old tree, and they could see that the old tree was nearing the end of its life. Even if they left him alone, he'd still die. But since he wanted to die, they'd send him on his way. As soon as he finished speaking, Ancestor Bai made his move. He gently pointed out with his finger, and a beam of light streaked across the sky, heading straight for the old tree. In the face of Ancestor Bai's attack, the old tree's body emitted a green light that enveloped him. However, the azure light that filled the sky was unable to stop Ancestor Bai's attack. When the two collided, the cyan light surrounding the old tree was directly shattered. It was not even able to block the attack. The difference in strength was simply too great. It was so great that there was no way to make up for it through other means. In terms of strength, the old tree could not be considered an ancient life form. Therefore, there was nothing the old tree could do in the face of the primogenitor's attack. It could only watch helplessly. With one strike, the old tree was directly shattered. The terrifying spiritual energy instantly killed the old tree. He did not purposely try to annoy the old tree. Instead, he simply killed it with a single strike. Everyone had known each other for so many years. The primogenitors didn't have any bad taste in someone who was about to die. Moreover, looking at the old tree's death, Ancestor Chio's face revealed a tinge of sorrow, although it was just a flash. Time was the ultimate enemy that many people had to face. Unless they were like the primogenitors, who had transcended the limits of time, they would inevitably be eroded by time. He's still old. This is already the best ending for him. As soon as Qiu Zhu's voice fell, Qing Zhu, who was standing at the side, said faintly, although he was dead, this was actually the best outcome for the old tree. At least it was much better than dying of old age. There was no doubt about that. After dealing with the old tree, Ancestor Mu, Ancestor Bai took a step forward and chased after Mu Ling and the others. You guys deal with the place of creation. The two of us will deal with the other fishes that escaped the net. Mu Ling and the others escaped, but they didn't go far. Ancestor Mu and Ancestor Bai took action personally. As for the others, they destroyed the place of creation. The other primogenitors naturally had no objections. On the other side, Mu Ling and the others had successfully escaped with the help of the old tree. Although they were grieving, they didn't dare to linger because they weren't out of danger yet. They ran quickly. However, Ancestor Mu and Ancestor Bai appeared out of thin air in front of them and blocked their way. Seeing Ancestor Bai and Ancestor Mu, Mu Ling and the others stopped helplessly. With their way blocked, there was no way for them to escape. They still didn't succeed. In the hands of the primogenitors, even escaping was an extravagant hope. You guys know that it's impossible to succeed, Ancestor Bai said faintly as he looked at Mu Ling and the others. From the beginning, Mu Ling and the others should have known that the possibility of them escaping in front of the primogenitors was close to zero. How would we know if we don't try? Mu Ling gritted her teeth and said. In response, Ancestor Bai revealed a faint smile. Now you know the result? Humph! Where is the heaven and earth spirit? Mu Ling snorted coldly and didn't linger on the question. Instead, she asked about Little Qing's whereabouts. She didn't believe that Little Qing was in any danger because the primogenitors couldn't possibly kill Little Qing. Moreover, Little Qing had Xiao Chun and the others by her side. In response, Ancestor Bai simply chuckled and said, "Don't worry. Is this important to you guys? She isn't dead, but you guys won't be able to see her." Whether Little Qing was dead or not had nothing to do with Mu Ling and the others. Even if she wasn't dead, Mu Ling and the others wouldn't be able to see her. Mu Ling didn't say anything. There was indeed no hope in the current situation. Moreover, there were continuous waves of attacks coming from behind them. It was obvious that the other primogenitors had begun their operation to destroy the land of creation. Mu Ling's face turned gloomy and her heart ached when she thought about the disaster that had befallen the land of creation. It was hard to imagine how many living beings would be killed in the land of creation after this round of attacks. Probably no one would be able to survive in such a situation. No one could withstand the attacks of the primogenitors. To the many living beings in the land of creation, no one could withstand their attacks. This was the end of the world. Despair, fear, and helplessness intertwined in everyone's hearts. Looking at the wood spirit's incomparably complicated expression, Ancestor Bai did not waste any more words. He directly pointed his finger and spoke indifferently. There's no need to pointlessly struggle. Everything is already decided. Go in peace. As he spoke, Ancestor Bai pointed his finger at the wood spirit. The wood spirit had no way of dodging this attack, let alone blocking it. A dense aura of death instantly enveloped her, begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 3007. An aura of death enveloped him, and the wood spirit gave up on resisting. In front of a primogenitor, the wood spirit knew full well that he had no ability to resist. There was no way he could dodge or block this attack. He could only watch as the finger beam shot towards him. At this critical moment, Yi Qin's heart was pounding. At this critical moment, the stone spirit patriarch leapt in front of the wood spirit and blocked the attack. The stone spirit patriarch had saved the wood spirit, but he was killed in a single blow. His body, which could be said to possess a perverse defense, was instantly torn apart by Ancestor Bai's attack. "You?" The wood spirit cried out in grief as he watched the stone spirit patriarch's life force fade away. He had never imagined that the stone spirit patriarch would be the one to save him, only to be mercilessly killed. What's the point? The result will be the same. Ancestor Bai didn't seem to care at all. In his opinion, even if the stone spirit patriarch had fearlessly saved the wood spirit, it wouldn't change anything. As long as he wanted to, he could still kill the wood spirit quickly. Think of a way to escape. You're strong. so you have a chance." Before dying, the stone spirit patriarch spoke his final words. He had saved the wood spirit only because he was the strongest, and thus had a better chance of escaping. After all, the wood spirits were the true living beings of the ancient era. The stone spirit patriarch, old tree, and the others were not true living beings of the ancient era. However, the wood spirit didn't know how to respond to the stone spirit patriarch's request. Could he escape? Or rather, did he have a chance of escaping? Faced with the obstruction of two primogenitors, the chances were minuscule. Compared to the stone spirit patriarch, the wood spirit understood even more how terrifying the primogenitors were. Therefore, escaping would be very difficult. In fact, it could even be said to be impossible. With the stone spirit patriarch dead, Ancestor Bai looked at the wood spirit and prepared to attack. "I bought some time, but the result hasn't changed at all." He pointed his finger again, and the beam of light shot towards the wood spirit. But this time, who could save the wood spirit? He wanted to kill the wood spirit with a single blow, so there wouldn't be any mishaps this time. However, just as Ancestor Bai was about to attack, Xiao Chan appeared out of thin air in front of the wood spirit. He casually waved his hand, and a spiritual barrier appeared in front of him, successfully blocking Ancestor Bai's attack. Seeing Xiao Chen appear, the wood spirit's gloomy expression was instantly replaced by joy. "It seems you're not too late." On the other hand, Ancestor Bai had an ugly look on his face. Ancestor Bai, on the other hand, had an ugly look on his face. "You." Ancestor Bai did not expect Xiao Chen to appear here. Shouldn't he have been trapped in the land of all beings by Ancestor Qing and Ancestor Qiu? Even for Xiao Chen and the others, it would have taken them at least several days to break through that grand matrix. Now, only less than 2 days had passed. How had he managed to break the formation so quickly of the wood spirit? And since Xiao Chen was here, what about Lil Qing, Lin Yun, and the others? With a thought, as expected, waves of battle rippled out from the land of creation. Amidst the waves of battle rippled out from the land of creation, in addition to the auras of the primogenitors, there was also the aura of Little Qing, Lin Yun, and even Armageddon. In other words, everyone was fighting fiercely over at the land of creation. Xiao Chen's appearance was beyond Ancestor Bai and Ancestor Mu's expectations. Their plans were completely disrupted. They thought they had enough time to destroy the land of creation. But who would have thought that Xiao Chen and the others would break the formation so quickly? Surprised, Xiao Chen said casually when he saw Ancestor Bai's astonished expression. "How could you? So fast? The formation isn't bad, but it's a pity that the formation base is too weak." Before Ancestor Bai could finish, Xiao Chen gave him the answer. This time, the formation set up by the primogenitors was indeed powerful. At the very least, it could trap Xiao Chen and the others. But just as Xiao Chen said, the formation was powerful, but there were too many flaws in the formation base. The formation bases scattered in the land of living weren't protected at all. As long as someone went there, they could be easily destroyed. And if the formation bases were destroyed, would the formation still function normally? Therefore, it wasn't too difficult for Xiao Chen and the others to break out of the formation so quickly. Of course, this was also the last resort of the primogenitors. They couldn't enter the land of living in the first place. That was why they could only use this method to not destroy the formation. It wasn't easy for them to reach this stage. But in the end, this plan seemed to have ended in failure because it couldn't trap Xiao Chen and the others for too long. It also didn't achieve the expected effect at all. Looking at Xiao Chen's calm expression, Ancestor Bai and Ancestor Mu heaved a sigh of relief. At this point, it seemed like there was no point in saying anything. Since Xiao Chen and the others had successfully broken out, a battle was inevitable. There's no need to say anything more. Let's fight. He looked at Ancestor Mu and Ancestor Bai. Everyone had fought many times and was very familiar with each other. Since they had met, there was no need to say anything more. Let's fight directly. As soon as he finished speaking, Xiao Chen took the initiative to attack without waiting for the other two to reply. He moved and instantly appeared in front of Ancestor Bai and Ancestor Mu. Holding the dustless sword in his hand, he slashed out. The sword blade swept across and went straight for Ancestor Bai. Ancestor Bai didn't dare to be careless in the face of Xiao Chen's attack. He knew very well that Xiao Chen's strength was already above the other primogenitors. He tried his best to resist, and even Ancestor Mu helped. The two of them worked together to block Xiao Chen's attack. The three of them immediately engaged in a fierce battle. Without any probing, they attacked with all their strength. Still a little lacking. If I could be a little stronger, I might be able to break through this critical point. Xiao Chen didn't fall into a disadvantageous position, even though he was fighting 1 against 2. However, he felt helpless. With Xiao Chen's current strength, he could fight 2 primogenitors head-on without falling into a disadvantageous position. However, he couldn't gain any advantage. It could be said that the 2 sides were evenly matched. They were at a critical point where no one could do anything to the other. However, if Xiao Chen's strength was a little stronger, he might be able to break through this critical point. At that time, Xiao Chen would be able to defeat or even kill 2 primogenitors. Unfortunately, at Xiao Chen's level of cultivation, it was difficult to improve one's strength. It was already very difficult to improve one's strength. Even if it was just a little improvement, it could be said that it was as difficult as ascending to the heavens. It was not strange for one to not improve for tens of thousands of years. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. End of chapter. Chapter 3008. It was very easy for low-level martialists to increase their strength and break through their cultivation realm. As long as they had enough talent, diligent cultivation, and sufficient resources, it was easy to break through. However, after reaching Xiao Chen's level, any improvement was extremely difficult. Needless to say, regardless of whether it was Xiao Chen, the primogenitors, or the other primogenitors, they were already at the pinnacle of this world. If they could not break through, they would have to create their own paths, even if they wanted to break through, not to mention that they were already people who had transcended the laws of the world. If Xiao Chen and the others still wanted to break through their cultivation realm, they had to create it themselves. They had to create a brand new realm, a brand new cultivation system, or rather, a brand new source of power. The heaven and earth spirit chi was still not enough for Xiao Chen and the others to break through to a higher realm. Just like when Xiao Chen and the others broke through, they relied on the power of living beings. In addition to cultivation realm, strength was also the same. The current Xiao Chen, regardless of which aspect, was perfect. His speed and strength could be said to be flawless. It was very difficult to increase them again. It was because of this that Xiao Chen had such thoughts. Even if his strength increased a little, it would cause a huge change when he faced the 2 primogenitors. He didn't need too much. Even if it was just a little bit, it would be enough to change the outcome. However, this little bit of improvement was extremely difficult. It was very difficult to take this step. He felt helpless. However, Xiao Chen didn't have time to think too much during the battle. Facing 2 primogenitors at the same time, Xiao Chen still had to go all out. While Xiao Chen, Ancestor Bai, and Ancestor Mu were fighting fiercely, Lin Yin, Little Qing, Dongfang Yin, and Mo, He Ancestor He, and the others were in the land of creation. At this time, they were also fighting fiercely with Armageddon, Ancestor Qing, and the others. However, the place where they were fighting fiercely was in the land of creation. This couldn't be helped. When Little Qing and the others arrived at the land of creation, Ancestor Qing and the others had already entered the land of creation. They had no choice but to fight in the land of creation. They knew very well what kind of damage their battle would cause to the land of creation, but what could they do about it? It was obvious that the primogenitors would not leave the place of creation. The only way to stop them was to take action. The terrifying shockwaves of the battle raged wildly. Under such a great battle, the land of creation was forcibly torn apart. The ground below was being torn apart inch by inch. Every time they clashed, it was a disaster for the land of creation. Little Qing was undoubtedly the most distressed about all of this. but there was nothing he could do. Especially now, with Armageddon holding her back, little Qing could not afford to be distracted. Even little Qing had an illusion that Armageddon's strength seemed to be stronger than before, and the pressure he gave her was even greater than before. Spirit of heaven and earth, you cannot be distracted in battle. Just as little Qing was distracted, World Destroyer seized the opportunity and threw out a punch. As fast as lightning, it accurately hit little Qing's abdomen. Instantly, little Qing was sent flying like a cannonball. Little Qing slammed into the ground below the land of creation. In an instant, the mountains collapsed and the earth cracked. A large piece of land was directly shattered by little Qing. Damn it! Little Qing spat out a mouthful of blood from the corner of her mouth, but it was not too bad. She cursed inwardly, then soared into the sky and charged towards World Destroyer again. She had only been distracted for a moment, and World Destroyer had seized the opportunity. This guy's strength had indeed improved. Although little Qing could not defeat him in their previous battle, she had firmly held the upper hand. But this time, facing Armageddon again, little Qing discovered that he could actually fight on par with her. Little Qing did not know that World Destroyer had just been born the last time, and to be honest, he had not fully adapted to his strength. After this period of adaptation, World Destroyer could be considered to have truly grasped his strength. As such, he was naturally more skillful in battle. He was much stronger than before. Little Qing and World Destroyer were locked in battle, and so were the others. However, if this continued, it would be difficult to determine a victor. However, during the battle, Ancestor Qing and Ancestor Qilin directly ordered the other cultivators of the origin world to attack at the same time. Because of the urgency of the situation, only Shao Chun and a few others had rushed to the land of creation. As for the other experts of the land of all living beings, they had not arrived yet. On the other hand, the origin world had tens of thousands of experts, and they absolutely had an overwhelming advantage in terms of numbers. This is an opportunity. Ancestor Qing and Ancestor Qilin were sharp enough to seize this opportunity. Using the advantage of numbers, they might be able to obtain unexpected gains. If they could kill one of Shao Chun and the others, it would be excellent news for the origin world. It might even be better than destroying the land of creation, because at the level of Shao Chun and the others, even the loss of one person would have a huge impact on the entire battle. Losing one person meant that in the next fierce battle, there would be a primogenitor who would not be stopped by anyone. It went without saying what kind of terrible consequences a primogenitor would cause if no one stopped him. With tens of thousands of experts, they would use the advantage of numbers to exhaust them to death. Moreover, the primogenitors did not intend to disperse their forces. They directly targeted Ancestor He. Among Shao Chun and the others, Shao Chun and Lin Yun were the strongest. They had surpassed the primogenitors. After them were Dongfang Yun, Mo He, Xinyuan Ling, and Ancestor He. The four of them were on par with each other. Therefore, it was naturally the most suitable choice to target the four of them. Ancestor He, who was fighting fiercely with the Qilin ancestor, was soon besieged by many experts of the origin world. Coupled with the Qilin ancestor's main attack, Ancestor He quickly fell into a disadvantageous position. Although Ancestor He had killed many experts of the origin world during this process, no one was able to withstand his attacks. No one was a match for him. However, the origin realm didn't care about the deaths of these experts. After all, they could come back to life after death. What the primogenitors cared about was that Ancestor He could not help but divert a part of his attention while being besieged by so many people. The Qilin ancestor also seized this opportunity to attack fiercely and firmly occupy an absolute advantage. If this continued, it would not be impossible to injure Ancestor He. They could also see what the primogenitors wanted to do. However, Ancestor Qing and the others firmly held back Dongfang Yun, Mu Ling, and Mo He, and the others. Otherwise, they would not have any chance to support Ancestor He. Please add, please vote, please recommend. End of chapter. Chapter 3009. Although Xiao Chun and the others had successfully broken the siege of the formation, it only took them less than 2 days to arrive at the place of creation. This came as a surprise to the progenitors, but since only Xiao Chen's group had come, the progenitors grasped this opportunity perfectly. They wanted to use their advantage in numbers to besiege and kill Ancestor He. As long as they could kill one of them, the pressure on the primal origin world would be greatly reduced. After all, it was extremely difficult to make up for the loss of any one of these top experts. On the other hand, the top combatants were capable of influencing the outcome of the entire battle. This was something that everyone knew. Lin Yun, Dongfang Yun, Mu Lingxian, and the others knew the primal ancestor's goal. They wanted to help Ancestor He when they saw him besieged. Unfortunately, they were held back by Ancestor Qing and the others. They couldn't leave at all. Meanwhile, the primal origin world's cultivators besieged Ancestor He like crazy, constantly exhausting his strength. At the same time, the Qilin ancestor, who was fighting fiercely with Ancestor He, attracted most of Ancestor He's attention. Damn it, Ancestor He couldn't help cursing as the pressure increased. They wanted to kill him here. He hadn't expected to become the primal ancestor's target. However, there was nothing he could do. In order to rescue the land of creation in time, Xiao Chun and the others had to come first. As for the main force of the land of creation, they were still behind. Their speed was naturally slower than Xiao Chun and the others. However, it was precisely because of this that Ancestor He had fallen into such a dangerous situation. If this continued, Ancestor He might really be killed. It could be considered a pleasant surprise. However, just as the primogenitors felt that their plan had succeeded, many living beings in the land of creation spontaneously stopped them and joined the battle. Let's do it. These guys from the primal origin world are too much of a bully. Previously, the living beings in the land of creation couldn't resist the primal ancestors' attacks at all. However, with the arrival of Lin Yun and the others, the primal ancestors' attacks were successfully stopped. This gave them a rare chance to take a breather. Soon, they organized themselves and planned to fight the origin world until the end. Although the living beings in the land of creation had suffered heavy casualties due to the attack just now, there were still some lucky survivors. With the addition of the surviving living beings, a hint of joy appeared on Ancestor He's face. The reason was simple. The living beings of the creation ground were not targeting the primogenitors. He would leave it to Lin Yun and the others to deal with existences at the level of the primal ancestors. Their targets were the warriors of the primal origin world. Soldier against soldier, general against general, this was the most reasonable choice. However, because of this, the pressure on Ancestor He was greatly reduced. The warriors of the origin world couldn't ignore the reinforcements of the creatures from the origin world. A bunch of ants. How dare you spoil my plans? But while Elder He was happy, Elder Lin's face looked terrible. He had already felt that Elder He was not strong enough. But now, the appearance of these ants had attracted the attention of many warriors of the origin world, and the pressure on Ancestor He was greatly reduced. Without the cooperation of the warriors of the origin world, Elder Lin knew very well that it was impossible for him to do anything to Elder He. Their strengths were on par, so no one could gain the upper hand in a one-on-one battle. He was clearly about to succeed, but who would have imagined that a bunch of ants would spoil his plans? Elder Lin couldn't help but curse angrily. Ancestor He was rather happy about this. Don't get distracted when fighting me. As he spoke, Ancestor He was in high spirits, and he suddenly punched out and blasted Elder Lin back. Elder Lin gnashed his teeth in anger because of this. His arrogant attitude from before was gone, and he was acting fierce with him now. Without the interference of the warriors of the origin world, Ancestor He was naturally not afraid of Elder Lin, and the two of them fought back and forth. Qing Zhu and the others felt extremely helpless in this regard. It was very difficult for the living beings of the creation ground to pose any threat to Ancestor He. Most importantly, the situation had changed completely with the appearance of the living beings of the creation ground. Now, it was time for the primogenitors to consider if they should retreat. Because based on the current situation, it was very likely that the forces of the land of beings would arrive if they persisted. At that time, the situation from before would happen to the primogenitors. They hadn't brought many people to deal with the creation ground this time, and now that the land of beings had the advantage in numbers, it would be even more difficult for the primogenitors to retreat. Even though Ancestor Hay was heavily injured, he still hadn't lost his ability to fight, and he was still able to exchange blows with Elder Lin. It was very difficult to end the battle in a short time, so the primogenitors were already considering the matter of retreating. They weren't willing to suffer a double loss and lose their own lives. Elder Qing started to send a message in secret when he thought up to here, and he indicated for them to retreat because they couldn't delay any longer. The other primogenitors clearly had no objections to Elder Qing's words, and they quickly agreed. Then, the primogenitors retreated as they fought. Although both sides were still fighting, it was obvious that the primogenitors weren't in the mood to continue fighting. Elder Qing took advantage of the collision to retreat. Then, he formed a seal with both hands, and in an instant, a gap was torn open in space. "Stop them!" Mu Lingxian shouted coldly when he saw the gap, but he wasn't able to catch up. Green Ancestor, Qilin Ancestor, and the others reacted immediately. They retreated without looking back. Spirit of heaven and earth, not bad. Let's fight again next time. After fighting fiercely with Little Qing for a while, Elder Lin sneered and also entered the gap without looking back. Little Qing was furious, but there was nothing she could do to stop him. This guy's strength had improved again. There was nothing she could do about Little Qing. The primogenitors retreated, including Elder Bai and Elder Mu, who were fighting fiercely with Xiao Chun. They naturally received Elder Qing's message and knew that it was no longer suitable to continue fighting. Xiao Chun and the others were touched. There was a change in the plan, and it was time to retreat. Therefore, in the midst of the fierce battle, Elder Bai successfully opened a space tunnel, and the two of them disappeared in a flash. Seeing the two of them leave, Xiao Chun didn't choose to chase after them. Who knew if the primogenitors had any tricks up their sleeves? Moreover, it was too risky to chase after them alone. Once he was surrounded by the primogenitors, Xiao Chun would be in danger. Therefore, he let the two of them escape. Please add, vote, recommend. Swordmaster 8 Desolations error-free chapters will continue to be updated in the new Booksy Pavilion. There are no advertisements on the website. Please add and recommend the new Booksy Pavilion. If you like Swordmaster 8 Desolation, please add. Swordmaster 8 Desolations new Booksy Pavilion updates the fastest. Chapter 3010. It couldn't be helped that the primal ancestors had successfully retreated. As for the primal origin world's cultivators, they didn't care about them at all. The primal ancestors didn't care about their lives. In their eyes, the warriors of the origin world were just pawns that they could throw away easily. Even if they died in battle, they could be resurrected when the time came. Moreover, they could stay here and buy some time. Besides, Lin Yun and the others couldn't chase after them even if they wanted to. This was because Ancestor Hay suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood after the primal ancestors had retreated. Obviously, the fierce battle had injured him quite badly. He had been forcefully holding on before this. Ancestor Hay definitely wasn't as relaxed as he looked after taking several direct attacks from the Qilin ancestor. He had already reached his limit by fighting until now. Because of this, Lin Yun and the others gave up on pursuing him. After all, they were at a disadvantage in numbers. Who knew what the consequences would be if they rashly chased after him? It wouldn't be a small matter if there were casualties. After thinking about it, they decided to let the primal ancestors retreat. The battle had come to an end for the time being, and the primal origin world's cultivators were quickly wiped out. They returned with the wood spirit and met up with Little Qing, Lin Yun, and the others. However, their faces were gloomy when they saw the land of creation before them. Even though he managed to make it in time and stop the primogenitors, the place of creation was still in shambles after the battle. That's right. The original continent had been shattered into small continents because of the battle. It seemed like it hadn't been completely destroyed, but in fact, the land of creation existed in name only. We were still one step too late. The main reason for all of this was that the battle had broken out inside the land of creation. Even though Shao Chun and the others had stopped the primal ancestors from attacking the land of creation directly, the aftermath of their battle still caused great damage to the land of creation. Such damage was obviously irreversible and irreversible. It couldn't be restored to its previous state. It could be said that the land of creation had been destroyed. Faced with such an outcome, no one was in a good mood, especially little Qing. This was her home, but now they could only watch helplessly as it was destroyed. Her eyes were cold as she stared at the land of creation that was falling apart. Little Qing did not speak for a long time. Shao Chen didn't know what to say and could only accompany them. This group of old bastards, I will definitely not let them off. After a long while, little Qing gritted her teeth and said, hearing this, Shao Chun sighed. I'm still one step too late. With that, the masses entered the land of creation. To put it bluntly, the land of creation had already turned into a wasteland. The mountains and rivers of the past no longer existed. As far as the eye could see, there were ruins floating in the endless void, and the spiritual energy was chaotic to the extreme. Furthermore, as time passed, the spirit chi of heaven and earth would continue to decrease until it completely disappeared. It could be said that the land of creation was no longer suitable for anyone to live in. Apart from that, as the old tree and the other native beings of the land of creation died in this battle, the land of creation's strength had suffered a heavy blow. At this moment, the only ancient being left was the wood spirit. That's right, the land of creation originally had many ancient beings, but now the wood spirit was the only one left. For example, the old tree, the stone spirit tribe patriarch, and the fire spirit tribe patriarch were all killed in the battle just now. Such a loss was definitely difficult to make up for, and it was a huge blow to the strength of Shao Chun and the others. They went all the way to their former residence. This was where little Qing had always lived. It was a small world independent of the land of creation, but now it was still full of holes. The previous fierce battle had also overwhelmed this small world. Although it hadn't collapsed directly, it was no different from being destroyed. The space was full of void storms and countless spatial cracks. The sky was dark, and the spiritual energy was chaotic. It was no longer as leisurely and peaceful as it was before. Seeing that her residence had been directly destroyed, little Qing couldn't help but gnash her teeth. It was just that she was a step too late and couldn't stop the primogenitors outside the land of creation. Otherwise, the land of creation wouldn't be in such a state. This also proved that a battle of this level definitely couldn't erupt directly in a world. If the battle had erupted in the land of living beings, the land of living beings would probably have suffered the same fate. It wouldn't have been able to withstand the aftermath of the battle. This was why Shao Chun and the others had always been on guard against the primogenitors entering the land of living beings. Once the battle had erupted in the land of living beings, no matter what the final outcome was, the land of living beings would definitely be destroyed, just like the land of creation. After forcefully suppressing the fury in her heart, little Qing spoke after a long while. The land of creation has already been destroyed. The remaining people can join the land of living beings. Little Qing had no interest in creating a new land of creation. Furthermore, as the origin of the world, the land of creation couldn't be created just because she wanted to. Even if little Qing had the ability to do so, it wouldn't be easy. As such, after thinking about it, little Qing decided to directly merge the survivors of the land of creation into the land of living beings. Shao Chen naturally had no objections to this. Moreover, this was indeed the best choice right now. Let's go. I still have some good things. Let's take them all. Since little Qing was going to completely abandon the land of creation, she naturally had to take away some of the treasures she had accumulated. She brought everyone to where she had stored her treasures. There, Shao Chun and the others saw many natural treasures, as well as several balls of origin energy. Xiao Chen didn't care about the other things, but Xiao Chun was tempted when he saw the balls of origin energy. Right now, Xiao Chun wanted to help Xiao Qing and buy Ryu a break through to the level of World Lord. So he needed to use the power of the origin. The few balls of power of the origin before him were obviously able to alleviate his urgent need. Little Qing waved her hand and collected all the treasures. Then, she turned to Xiao Chun and said, "Let's go. Let's leave this place first." These treasures belonged to Little Qing, so Xiao Chun, Lin Yun, and the others didn't say much about it. Moreover, although these treasures were precious and might be useful to others, they didn't mean much to Xiao Chun and the others. "Yes, let's go. Ancestor Hei's injuries aren't light. He probably needs some time to recuperate," Lin Yun replied. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 30:11. Although they had rushed over as soon as possible, the land of creation had still been destroyed. The terrifying shockwaves from their battle caused the entire land of creation to fall apart. As for the living beings in the original land of creation, they were all killed. Of those who survived, less than 1 in 10 survived. It could be said that the land of creation was now completely worthless. Therefore, Xiao Qin's group directly returned to the land of living beings after collecting all the useful items. Although it wasn't stated clearly, everyone knew that the land of creation would probably cease to exist from now on. Meanwhile, Little Qing and the other living beings of the land of creation would be directly absorbed into the land of living beings. This wasn't a problem. It was very simple for the land of living beings to accommodate them. There was no pressure at all. Moreover, with the development of the land of all living beings, its surface area was also constantly expanding. In just a few short years, the land of living beings had expanded by a fifth compared to when it had just been created. Of course, this was all done by Xiao Qin's group. He led everyone back to the land of living beings. At the same time, he sent a message to Xianyuan Ling and the others, telling them not to come over. After all, the battle had ended. It was meaningless for Xianyuan Ling and the others to come. It was better for them to return to the land of living beings. Under the lead of Xiao Qin's group, they directly opened a spatial tunnel, allowing the survivors of the land of creation to arrive at the land of living beings. So many people had entered the land of living beings. Moreover, they were all natives of the land of creation. Naturally, they needed to be properly arranged. It was hard to say whether the people of the land of living beings would be able to accept the inhabitants of the land of creation. Therefore, Xiao Chun didn't plan to arrange for them to stay together. Instead, he divided a territory for the inhabitants of the land of creation to live in. Without a doubt, this matter was left to Li Tian, Xianyuan Ling, and the others. The news of the land of creation's destruction was like a storm, quickly spreading to every corner of the land of living beings. Almost all the experts knew that the origin world had launched a sneak attack on the land of creation. Although Xiao Qin's group had rushed to the rescue, they were still a step too late. Facing such an outcome, everyone sighed. At the same time, they felt their hearts palpitate, because this time it was the land of creation. Would it be their land of living beings next time? This is the land of creation. It's gone just like that? The primogenitors of the origin world launched a sneak attack. The sacred ancestors were caught off guard. That's why they succeeded. But isn't this a bit too much? An entire continent was destroyed just like that. If the primogenitors were to attack us, would the land of all living beings be able to hold on? Nonsense. That's because there's no one guarding the land of creation. I've always heard that the spirit of heaven and earth has been staying in the land of living beings all this time. That's right. The origin world dares to ambush the land of creation, but it doesn't dare to ambush the land of all living beings. The situation is completely different. That's true. With the sacred ancestor here, the land of all beings will definitely be fine. Countless people were talking about the destruction of the land of creation. Of course, more people were worried about their own safety. It couldn't be helped. People were like that. Compared to other things, they care more about themselves. This was especially so after hearing about the tragedy of the land of creation. After all, no one wanted to be killed just like that. More than 90% of the living beings in the land of creation had been killed in a short day. Now, there were very few survivors, and all of them had been moved to the land of all living beings. The people of the land of all living beings didn't have any special reaction to the arrival of the living beings from the land of creation. This was because Xin Yuan Ling and Li Tian had specially arranged for them to live in their own areas. There was no situation of them seizing resources. In addition, the most important thing was that the land of all living beings was ruled by Sacred Hall. As long as Sacred Hall didn't fall, as long as the sacred ancestors existed, the entire land of all living beings had to operate according to Sacred Hall's rules. No matter how strong you were, you couldn't go against Sacred Hall's will in the land of all living beings. Therefore, although everyone was talking about the land of creation, no one did anything unnecessary. Xiao Chun and the others didn't know what the people below were thinking, nor did they have any interest in investigating. After returning to Sacred Hall, Xiao Chun and the others hurriedly began to treat Ancestor Hei's injuries. Ancestor Hei's injuries weren't light. After all, he had been besieged by so many people and had taken several attacks from the Qilin ancestor. It wasn't easy for Ancestor Hei to hold on until now. Although it wasn't life-threatening, he needed to recuperate for a period of time to recover. However, Xiao Chun and the others couldn't wait that long. The battle could erupt at any time. With Ancestor Hei's current state, he couldn't continue to participate in the battle. Therefore, Xiao Chun and the others decided to step in and help Ancestor Hei heal. In a small world rich in spiritual qi, Ancestor Hei sat cross-legged in the center. Xiao Chun, Little Qing, Lin Yun, Dongfang Yun, Mu Lingxian, and Mo He, and the others gathered around him. Strands of pure spiritual qi emerged from everyone's bodies and continuously flowed into Ancestor Hei's body. The enormous spiritual qi was extremely gentle. After entering Ancestor Hei's body, it flowed through his meridians. With the help of the spiritual qi, Ancestor Hei's injuries quickly recovered. At this speed, Ancestor Hei's injuries would stabilize in a few days. At that time, coupled with medicinal pills, Ancestor Hei would recover in less than half a month. Old man, so many of your meridians have been broken. Emohi teased as he healed Ancestor Hei. They didn't know before, but now they knew how serious Ancestor Hei's injuries were. Many of his meridians had been broken. If they hadn't stopped the battle in time, Ancestor Hei would have been in danger of dying if the battle had continued. So the situation had become so dangerous. It was something they hadn't expected. Fortunately, the survivors of the Origin World had stepped in and helped Ancestor Hei block the attacks of many Origin World cultivators. Otherwise, the outcome would have been difficult to predict. Ancestor Hei said helplessly when he heard Mo He's words. I don't want to either. Perhaps there is a way. He's lucky. If it was anyone else, they would have died a long time ago with so many of their meridians broken. All right, let's focus on healing. Let's not talk about this for now. Now that they knew about Ancestor Hei's injuries, they didn't dare be careless in the slightest. They did their best to heal Ancestor Hei. This was probably the first time anyone had suffered such serious injuries after becoming sacred ancestors. The primogenitors had really come to kill Ancestor Hei. Their attacks were extremely ruthless, especially the Qilin ancestors' attacks. They had all hit Ancestor Hei's vital points. It was obvious with a single glance that they wanted to kill Ancestor Hei, begging for a monthly vote, begging for a recommendation. Chapter 30:12. It took a full 5 days to restore the broken meridians in Ancestor Hei's body and completely stabilize his injuries. At present, Ancestor Hei's injuries were not too big of a problem. He only needed a few days of rest to recover. Slowly withdrawing their spiritual power, everyone exhaled a mouthful of turbid air, and Ancestor Hei also opened his eyes and said with a smile, "Thank you, everyone. Forget it. If you die, we will also be in trouble. In the face of Ancestor Hei's gratitude, everyone laughed and scolded indifferently. No matter what kind of relationship they had in the past, since the first time they cooperated, so many years had passed, and everyone had a tacit understanding of each other. So this small matter was actually nothing at all. After healing Ancestor Hei, everyone dispersed one after another. After all, in 5 days, in order to heal Ancestor Hei's injuries, everyone consumed a lot of energy. Back to his residence, Qin Shu and the other girls immediately greeted him and asked with concern, "How is it?" "It's not a big deal, just a few days of rest." The girls naturally asked about Ancestor Hei's injuries, and after hearing Xiao Chen's answer, they nodded. Then Xiao Chen asked again, "Yao and Lao, these two brats, I don't know where they went a long time ago. They probably went out to travel again, and it's with the two from Lin Yun's family." Xiao Yao and Xiao Lao couldn't stay at home at all now. Whenever they had time, they would ask Lin Feng, Lin Shui, and Dongfang Lin to travel. Of course, the range of travel was all in the land of living beings, and these little guys, needless to say, really made some achievements in the land of living beings. And they didn't rely on Xiao Chun, Lin Yun, and the others' aura. In this regard, Xiao Chun didn't say much. With Xiao Yao and the others' current strength, they shouldn't encounter any danger in the land of living beings. Their cultivation was not low. Although they were not invincible, they were definitely among the top powerhouses. In addition, each of them had many life-saving means. Even if a world lord wanted to kill them, it would not be easy. Therefore, Xiao Chun didn't worry too much. When the child grew up, he naturally needed to go out and make his own way. The land of living beings was extremely large, with all sorts of people, although Temple could not sense anything. However, in the land of all life, the struggle between the major forces was incomparably bitter. It was a good opportunity to train with these little fellows. After chatting with Qin Shiru and the other girls for a while, Xiao Chun went to visit his parents, Xiao Qing and Bai Ruyue. A few days passed peacefully. After Ancestor Hei had fully recovered, they gathered in the main hall and started to discuss their plan for the origin world. "We can make our move now. Li Tian has sent word that all the teleportation arrays have been found. There is nothing to worry about." Lin Yun spoke first. They should have attacked the origin world a long time ago, but because of the new warriors and the teleportation formation, they had been delayed. However, now that the new warriors and the teleportation formation had been found, they had nothing to worry about. No one had any objections to this. The battle with the origin world had been delayed for long enough. It was time to put an end to it. Moreover, now that they had nothing to worry about, Xiao Chun and the others planned to make the first move and destroy the origin world in one fell swoop. Then let's make our move. However, we can't give those old fellows any chance to take advantage of us this time. Yes, after fighting for so many years, it's time to put an end to it. Everyone chimed in one after another. Xiao Chun spoke after a moment of silence. "Although that's the case, we still need to make some preparations before the battle." "Xiao Chun, what do you mean?" "Those old fellows are all cunning. This time, we can't let them create a diversion and stall for time. Therefore, before the battle begins, I want to take a trip around the origin world with Lin Yun. The primogenitors had always been good at creating a diversion to stall for time. In the previous battle, if the primogenitors hadn't sent people to attack the land of living beings, the battle would have been over. The outcome of that battle would have been decided. After learning from the previous lesson, Xiao Chun didn't attack blindly. Instead, he made complete preparations before the battle began. According to Xiao Chen's plan, before the battle began, there shouldn't be a single formation around the origin world. They didn't need to trap the primogenitors completely. They only needed to prevent them from using a diversion tactic. To put it bluntly, the purpose of setting up the formation was to force the primogenitors to fight them head-on. Naturally, no one had any objections when they heard Xiao Chen's plan. It was good that they could defend against the primogenitors. Then it's settled. Xiao Chun and Lin Yun will go to the origin world first. We'll catch up later. Xiao Chun and Lin Yun went to set up the formation. Of course, it would take some time to set up the formation base, so there was no need to rush. Moreover, It would take some time to mobilize the troops for the battle with the origin world. It didn't mean that only Shao Chun and the others could go. This was a battle that required the strength of the entire land of living beings. All the forces in the land of living beings had to send experts to participate in the battle. This time, Shao Chun and the others didn't hold back at all. After the matter was settled, they heard that Shao Chun and the others were going to take the initiative to attack. When they returned to their residence, they naturally saw Qin Shi and the other women's worried faces. Shao Chun chuckled as he knew what the women were thinking. Don't worry. Nothing will happen. How do you know that the origin world isn't weak? We have to be careful. Qin Shi rolled his eyes at Shao Chun and said helplessly, how could the women not know how strong the origin world was? They were going to fight with the origin world again. It would be strange if the women weren't worried. However, as soon as Qin Shi finished speaking, Gu Lingyao spoke up. Husband, let's go together this time. We are all world lords now. Gu Lingyao wanted to go to the battlefield with Shao Chun, but Shao Chun shook his head and refused. No, there was no room for discussion. So what if they were world lords? In a battle of this level, even world lords had the possibility of dying. Moreover, Shao Chun wouldn't have the time to take care of anything else. Even if the women were in danger, Shao Chun wouldn't be able to rescue them immediately. Therefore, Shao Chun would never agree to let the women go to the battlefield. Seeing how determined Shao Chun was, Gu Lingyao pouted and said with a displeased look on her face, Why? Why can't we go? It's always like this. There's no room for discussion. Stay at home obediently. Ignoring Gu Lingyao's pestering, Shao Chun refused directly. Please add, vote, recommend. Chapter 30:13. Shao Chun directly rejected Gu Lingyao. Naturally, Shao Chun would not make any concessions in this matter. It was an extremely dangerous thing to let the women go to the battlefield. Moreover, in the current situation, the women would not be able to affect the outcome of the battle. It did not mean that they would not be able to win the battle if the women did not participate. Therefore, Shao Chun rejected them without hesitation. 100 Flower Fairy and Qin Shi were not surprised by Shao Chun's answer. It was within their expectations. All right, this is not a joke. You can stay at home and help me guard the land of all living beings. Shao Chun said with a smile when he saw that Gu Lingyao was still unwilling to give up. After giving some instructions to the women, he went to check on Shao Qing and Bai Ruyue. They had already found the origin source. Shao Chun planned to help the two elders break through to the World Lord realm. However, this matter was not urgent. They would talk about it after they dealt with the origin world. After a silent night, early the next morning, Shao Chun and Lin Yun left first. Little Qing, Dongfang Yun, and Mo He, Ancestor He, and the others set off with the rest of the team. This time, they planned to deal with the origin world once and for all. They did not want to be entangled with it any longer. The battle with the origin world had dragged on for too long. Moreover, the land of creation had been destroyed. Shao Chun and the others naturally could not allow the origin world to continue to exist. With Shao Chun and Lin Yun's speed, they were naturally very fast. It did not take long for them to arrive at the periphery of the origin world. However, the two of them did not continue to go deeper. Their current task was to carve the formation. Otherwise, during the battle, the primogenitors would create a diversion to the east and attack the west. Did you bring the formation base? Before they came, they had already prepared the formation base. Now, Shao Chun and Lin Yun only needed to follow the requirements of the formation and set up the formation base. Then, the formation would be completed immediately. Yes, we brought it. Then let's begin. Things might change if we delay. Without wasting any time, Shao Chun and Lin Yun immediately began to set up the formation. The purpose of this formation wasn't to seal the origin world. Of course, it couldn't do that. Shao Chun and the others couldn't set up a formation that could seal the origin world completely. After all, the strength of the primogenitors in Armageddon was there for all to see. While Shao Chun and the others were setting up the formation, the primogenitors and World Devastator had gathered together within the origin world. The leader green ancestor, said calmly, "This time, the plan to destroy the land of creation is a success. But next, we'll probably have to face the attack of the land of all beings." He knew that the destruction of the land of creation would definitely anger Xiao, Chun, Little Qing, and the others. As a result, a great battle between the two sides was bound to erupt. This was a problem that he had long expected. Ancestor Mu said when he heard that, "Success or failure will depend on this battle. And if we win this battle, the outcome will be decided. If we lose, I reckon we won't have a good ending." They knew what this battle meant. Moreover, since things had developed to this point, it was still a competition of strength. There wasn't much point in continuing with those little tricks, so the primogenitors simply gave up. They were waiting for Xiao Chun and the others to come and decide the outcome of this battle. As they spoke, the primogenitors' gazes fell on World Devastator. The outcome of this battle was crucial to World Devastator and Little Qing's battle. If World Devastator could defeat Little Qing, then they would have a great chance of winning this battle. World Devastator had been created for this moment. After a period of adaptation, World Devastator's strength had increased a lot. When he was in the land of creation, he could already suppress Little Qing. World Devastator didn't mind the gazes of the primogenitors. A cold glint flashed in his eyes as he spoke indifferently. "The spirit of heaven and earth isn't weak. We'll see when the time comes. I don't have a 100% chance of winning. World Devastator, there's one thing you have to be clear about. We're in the same boat now. That's right. If our origin world is defeated, you won't have a good ending. Xiao Chun and the others won't allow you to exist. If we die, you won't be able to escape alone." They continued to remind World Devastator about the current situation. After all, he was a little arrogant. The primogenitors had created him, but they couldn't really control him. Since he was born, he had never listened to the primogenitors. Therefore, when the battle was about to start, the primogenitors still reminded World Devastator, hoping that he would understand the seriousness of the situation. World Devastator nodded indifferently when he heard the primogenitor's words. "All right, I know. How many times have I said this? Don't worry, I won't go easy on you. I won't be lazy. I'll do my best. Is that okay?" The primogenitor's expressions became better when they heard World Devastator's promise. 3 days passed in the blink of an eye. During these 3 days, Xiao Chun and Lin Yun had finished setting up the formation outside the origin world. The formation couldn't stop the primogenitors, World Devastator, or even the primordial era's living beings. However, it could stop the people below, and that was enough for him. After the formation was set up, Little Qing, Mu Lingxian, Dongfang Yin, Ancestor He, and Mo He, and the others arrived with a large group. After they gathered, they didn't hide their tracks. After all, they couldn't hide even if they wanted to. As long as they approached the origin world, the primogenitors would discover them immediately. Therefore, they might as well go openly. Since they were going to fight anyway, it didn't make much of a difference whether they were discovered or not. Xiao Chun and the hundreds of thousands of people headed straight for the origin world. This was all the forces that the land of all beings could gather. Apart from Qin Shu and the others, all the experts above the primogenitor realm had gathered in the land of all beings. Xiao Chun and the others had used all their strength in this battle. They didn't give the origin world any chance to escape. As Xiao Chun and the others approached the origin world, the primogenitors knew about it immediately. They weren't too surprised and reacted quickly. They're finally here. This should be the final battle. It seems like Xiao Chun and the others have used all their trump cards. They have even more people than last time. And it's obvious that they want to fight to the death. If that's the case, let's fight. The origin world's portal opened wide. New cultivators flew out one after another to face Xiao Chun and the others who were charging ferociously. The primogenitors naturally didn't hold back either. They directly used all the forces of the origin world. They had more people than Xiao Chun and the others. There were several million of them. Of course, in terms of quality, they couldn't compare to Xiao Chun and the others. After all, there were Emperor Realm and Dao Transformation Realm cultivators in the origin world's camp. Please add, vote, recommend. Chapter 3014. New warriors swarmed out of the origin world one after another. This was the full strength of the primogenitors. There were millions of them, but most of them were Tao Transformation Realm and Tao Querying Realm warriors. On such a battlefield, Tao Transformation Realm and Tao Seeking Realm warriors could be said to be cannon fodder. Any attack would be enough to kill them, but the primogenitors didn't care at all. The life and death of these new warriors meant nothing to the primogenitors. It was enough as long as they could win. With the appearance of these new warriors, the two sides soon came into contact with each other. Shao Chun and the others led the land of all living beings experts and appeared outside the origin world. Standing on the deck of the spatial spirit ship, everyone looked into the distance and saw the primogenitors standing in front of the crowd, as well as Devastator and the others. They stood facing each other, their expressions calm. There were not many changes in their expressions. Everyone had already guessed that a battle was coming, so they weren't too surprised. Kill. Without wasting any time, the battle erupted with a low roar. Many warriors from both sides instantly engaged in a fierce battle. Meanwhile, Shao Chun, Little Qing, and the other primogenitors had all found their opponents. Little Qing was also suitable for Devastator, while Shao Chun was stopped by Ancestor Mu and Ancestor Qing. The dustless sword had already appeared in their hands. It wasn't the first time the three of them fought. They didn't waste any time and attacked with all their might. The originally calm, starry sky instantly turned into a fierce battlefield. The fragile space was torn apart inch by inch, and endless void storms raged wildly. They already knew the strength of both sides, so Ancestor Mu and Ancestor Qing weren't careless at all. They didn't give Shao Chun any chance. With a slash, the Emperor's sword was unleashed. The blade swept across the sky and went straight for Ancestor Mu and Ancestor Qing. Facing Shao Chun's attack, Ancestor Qing and Ancestor Mu acted at the same time and successfully blocked the attack. This was the final battle. This time, Shao Chun and the others were fully prepared. They wouldn't give the primogenitors any chance to escape. This battle was going to put an end to everything, and the primogenitors clearly understood this, which was why they were all prepared to fight to the death. Ever since the primogenitors started the chaos, the war had been going on for many years. During these years, the structure of the world had been completely changed. The various universes of the past no longer existed. As for the so-called world lords who had once stood at the top of the universe, they were no longer able to become the masters of this world. This was a change brought about by the war. During peacetime, the world lords are the strongest existences, overlords overseeing the various universes. But now, after the structure of the world had been completely changed, the world lord no longer had such great power. Their strength was no longer enough to influence the entire battle. Not to mention them, even the ancient creatures did not have this ability. Only by reaching the level of the primogenitors and Shao Chun could one truly stand at the top. This was a change in the era, and also a change brought about by the war. No one could stop it, let alone change it. While everyone was fighting fiercely in the land of all living beings, who knew how many tens of thousands of kilometers away, it was still a peaceful scene. It was as if the war in the outside world had nothing to do with the land of all living beings. Other than the experts who had been conscripted to participate in the war, everyone else was still living the same life. It was good to have protection. At least the people in the land of all living beings didn't have to worry about war all day long. As for Qin Shiru and the other women who weren't with them in the sacred palace, they were worried about the safety of Shao Chun and the others. They clearly knew that this was the final battle. They wouldn't stop until the primogenitor realm was completely eradicated. After fighting back and forth so many times, this was the last time, and the intensity of the battle this time would probably far exceed the previous ones. Mother. In the courtyard, Qin Shiru and the other women sat together, while Xiao Yao, Xiao Lao, and Xiao Wan walked into the courtyard. The women, who were originally gloomy, smiled when they saw the three of them. "You're back." The three of them had gone out to train. Now that they had returned to the sacred palace, the women smiled gently. In response, Xiao Lao sat down beside Hundred Flower Fairy and asked casually, "Mother, did father and the others go to the primogenitor realm?" "Yes, it's been a few days since they left. They should have arrived by now." Hearing this, Hundred Flower Fairy replied, "For something like the war in the primogenitor realm, Xiao Chun and the others didn't let Xiao Yao, Xiao Lao, and the other second generations participate. After all, although these second generations were talented and had begun to mature, they weren't qualified to participate in a war of this level. Even if they went, they wouldn't be able to change anything. They would only become ordinary people and face the danger of dying at any time. Therefore, Xiao Chun didn't tell them and let them continue to train in the land of living beings. However, after receiving the news, Xiao Yao, Xiao Lao, and the others hurried back. Obviously, they were also very concerned about the war. "Father and the others are really going to put an end to it this time?" Xiao Yao asked. Obviously, she had guessed something. In response, Qin Shiru and the other women nodded slightly. There was nothing to hide. Chapter 30:15. A rain of blood enveloped the entire battlefield. In peacetime, it could be said that the world lords were immortal and indestructible. However, on this battlefield, they no longer had such treatment. Even if they were world masters, there was still the possibility of them dying at any time. Even the slightest carelessness could lead to the descent of death. The battle between the numerous cultivators below was extremely tragic, and it was even more so when the top forces of both sides clashed. In a battle at the level of ancient life forms, it was obvious that the land of all living beings had an absolute advantage. There were only 3 ancient life forms in the origin world. On the other hand, the land of all living beings had a lot more bee slaves, Song, Mu Ling, and the others. This was the result of the primogenitor's scheme to destroy the land of creation and kill the old tree and the others. Otherwise, the gap between the ancient life forms would only be even greater. Even so, the land of all living beings still had an absolute advantage in a battle between ancient life forms. This was also the biggest difference between the two sides. See, Hu Huang was currently facing the joint attack of the beast slave and Song. Hu Huang had been at a disadvantage since the beginning when he was fighting against the two of them by himself. Moreover, it was obvious that Hu Huang had suffered serious injuries from the battle. There was a trace of blood at the corner of his mouth, and his complexion had become very pale. His aura had also become somewhat uncontrollable and chaotic. Unlike the previous time, Hu Huang had no chance this time. He could only choose to fight to the death with the beast slave and Song. If this situation continued, even if Hu Huang was an ancient life form, it was only a matter of time before he died. He was once again repelled by the combined attack of the beast slave and Song, and he spat out another mouthful of blood. Hu Huang looked coldly at the beast slave and Song, and the beast slave and Song similarly looked at Hu Huang with overflowing killing intent. According to the plan, the ancient life form side should be the first to determine a victor because Xiao Chun and the others had an absolute advantage here. As long as the ancient life form side, or the beast slave and the others, ended their battle, the situation would be completely reversed. The 6 primordial ancient creatures could definitely hold back primogenitor Ing, even if they could only hold back one primogenitor. If one of Xiao Chen's group was free, they could instantly take the initiative. Whether it was teaming up to kill the other primogenitors or giving Xiao Chun and Lin Yin a one-on-one chance, they could kill the other primogenitors. As long as one primogenitor was killed, the situation would be completely different. Therefore, the beast slave and Song knew what they had to do. Chapter 30:16. Hu Huang said before he died, However, the beast's slave and sure song did not answer him. It was no longer a simple question of right or wrong. Who could say for sure whether the creation of the new world was right or wrong? The only thing everyone was considering now was how to win. As for who was right or wrong, it was up to the winner to right. What else do you have to say now? Therefore, after hearing Hu Huang's words, not only did the beast's slave and sure song not stop, but their attacks became even more violent. While Hu Huang was being suppressed to the point of being forced back, the other two ancient creatures were also in a similar situation. Meanwhile, the battle between Xiao Chun and the rest had also reached its climax. Every one of them had sustained serious injuries. Xiao Chun was fighting two opponents at the same time, and there was also a trace of blood at the corner of his mouth. However, Ancestor Mu and Ancestor Qing did not have it easy either. Although they had injured Xiao Chun, they had also paid a huge price. Just like that, the two sides fought fiercely. Seizing the opportunity, Xiao Chun directly hit Ancestor Mu with his sword. The sharp edge of the sword left a deep bloody mark in front of Ancestor Mu. His entire body seemed to be torn apart by the sword. However, just as Xiao Chun hit Ancestor Mu, Ancestor Qing also seized the opportunity to throw a punch and hit Xiao Chun in the middle of his back. Ancestor Qing naturally would not let go of this rare opportunity. His fists fell like rain and swarmed over. In the blink of an eye, Ancestor Qing had already thrown out a sky full of fist shadows. Every punch carried unparalleled power and killed Xiao Chun completely. That's right. Under the sky full of fist shadows, Xiao Chen's physical body was completely blasted into a bloody mist in an instant. It exploded directly. However, it was obviously impossible to kill Xiao Chun just like that. Under the bloody mist, Xiao Chen's body quickly condensed and took shape. At the same time, Ancestor Mu, who was almost cut in half by Xiao Chen's sword, also recovered quickly at this moment. His body instantly fused back together as if he was not injured at all. At the level of Xiao Chun and the other primogenitors, it was no longer difficult for them to be reborn from a single drop of blood. It would be very, very difficult to kill Xiao Chun or any of the other primogenitors. For example, Xiao Chun had clearly been blasted apart by Ancestor Qing, but in the blink of an eye, he had recovered to his original state. Xiao Chun, Ancestor Qing, and Ancestor Mu weren't surprised at all because this was normal. However, at this point in the battle, even Xiao Chun, Ancestor Qing, and Ancestor Mu were exhausted. It was equivalent to having an immortal body. Every time they recovered, they would need to consume a lot of energy. They couldn't use it endlessly. When he reached his limit, that would be the moment when victory and defeat would be decided. The three of them were well aware of this, so they were frantically draining each other's energy. After a fierce battle, the rain of blood in the sky became heavier and heavier. This meant that more and more people had fallen. Even Little Qing and Great Devastator had reached the most critical moment. The two of them were locked in a fierce battle. However, at this moment, the battle between Beast Slave and Sure Song suddenly came to an end. Hu Huang, who was already an arrow at the end of its flight, was getting worse and worse under the joint attacks of Beast Slave and Sure Song. It wasn't easy to hold on until now. However, no matter how hard he clenched his teeth and persevered, there was still a limit. After his body had been blasted apart several times and recovered again, Hu Huang finally reached his limit. Beast Slave and Sure Song didn't give him any chance. They seized the opportunity to kill him directly. Die! With a low shout, the Beast Slave and Sure Song attacked at the same time. The Beast Slave fiercely punched out while Sure Song pointed out with his finger. Two attacks were launched at Hu Huang in a frenzy. Faced with the full-powered attacks of the two, Hu Huang was clearly unable to withstand them at this moment. Although he didn't choose to give up until the last moment, his extremely weak body made Hu Huang feel powerless. Hu Huang could only watch helplessly as the attacks of the two struck him. His body suddenly exploded. This time, Hu Huang was unable to recover. The remaining power wasn't enough for Hu Huang to reform his body. Beast Slave and Sure Song didn't give him the chance to do so either. After the first attack, the two of them attacked at the same time. They used their spiritual energy to envelop the blood mist. Under the shroud of their spiritual energy, Hu Huang, who had been blasted into a blood mist, was finally destroyed. He was completely dead. At this point in the battle, an ancient life form had finally begun to fall. Sensing Hu Huang's death, the primogenitor's faces changed. Qiu Zhu, in particular, had a look of grief in his eyes. Hu Huang and Qiu Zhu had the best relationship. The reason why Hu Huang had chosen the origin world was because of Qiu Zhu. But now, he could only watch helplessly as Hu Huang died. Was he the one who harmed him? Hu Huang was supposed to be an immortal ancient life form. However, he had been blasted to death in such a great battle. If this had happened at any other time, it would have been unthinkable. The world had been established for so many years. The beast slaves, Shi Song, and Hu Huang had existed since the beginning of the world. Until now, no one had fallen. But now, after the old trees group, another ancient creature had fallen. Streaks of red lightning began to appear in the sky. This was a phenomenon that would only appear after an ancient creature had fallen.